guys, what's going on? And welcome to ThisWeekInGeek.net, and welcome back to the DVD Blu-ray commentaries. That's right, guys. Happy Alien Day! This is April 26, 2024, and we are celebrating this by taking a look at one of my favorite movies of all time. We're going to be talking about the 1986 classic James Cameron's Aliens on 4K to celebrate the newest disc release of this movie. But this movie is also available in 4K on Disney+, but not the version we're going to be watching this evening. And I'm actually not alone tonight. I'm joined by my fellow Space Marine here in the Corps. Another glorious day in the Corps, you might say. Yes, I have brought back Liam. You may recognize them from Stargate SG-1 when we ran that on the Cambridge Chronicles a little while ago here on TWIG when we actually had the actual play podcast. I guess that would have been about a year or two ago.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, it's been a goddamn hot minute.
Yeah, a brief appearance.
So yeah, we are deciding to do this, I say, in honor of Alien Day, but actually Liam's doing something really spectacular because we're recording this the night before this, and as of right now, you've been drop shipped where?
Well, I didn't work out the exact where of the planet. Just kind of the general scenario is dropped in the middle of nowhere on a abandoned colony because we got a distress signal, and I basically have to do a whole lot of walking, go a whole lot of places, do your general kind of fetch quests, and then end up back at what I'm designating my safe area, or APC, my apartment. I'm going to rest, play video games, and trudge around.
Yeah, so Liam is doing something for this march, which is organized by a local group here in the region. He gets a really cool morale patch, but he's also doing it because we're going to be doing some stuff for Extra Life as well. And Liam has a Extra Life thing that is posted in the episode post. So thanks, Alex, or Alex's mother, I guess, in this case, or he's our android, I guess, artificial person. And yeah, so that also ties into something else that I've been talking about doing this on TikTok for a while, and I've talked about it a little bit on social media. So during Pokemon Go Fest later on this summer, I think first week of July, I'm going to be doing quote-unquote 24 hours in my wheelchair of playing Pokemon Go. I'm going to be using Palkia with Spatial Rend, and basically the entire Go Fest, I'm going to be in my chair going, and then with Liam's help and Blair's help, we're going to continue the grind in the car and in the wheelchair. When my battery dies, come home, charge it, hop in the car, cruise around. When that gets too much for my tailbone, come home, play some games, either online, maybe I'll do some kind of Twitch streaming, or I might just play some Go Battle League or something for kind of Pokemon, and just raise money for probably Toronto sick kids. As of this post recording, I'm still getting added to Liam's thing, but he does have some pretty cool stuff you can get as far as I understand. So please check out that post. And like I said, we're going to do some really cool stuff for charity this year here with This Week in Geek, and maybe more in the future, because as of this recording, I'm just preparing to launch my Dungeon Master for Hire service. I'm still getting some of the details worked out, but hopefully I'll have that ready for launch by Free RPG Day, which I believe is in early June. I'm going to get some of the details worked out, so stay tuned to my social media at BirdmanDod, and you'll be able to find out more about that going forward. So let's get back to what we were originally going to be talking about tonight. So we're going to be watching the new 4K Ultra HD disc of Aliens, which I understand this disc has been a bit of a hassle to get a hold of, because I had to wait to get mine for like a week from like Amazon. So your mileage may vary on trying to find this disc. So we are going through the disc menus to get to the special edition. And trying to get this to sync up to the right part was kind of a huge pain in the ass, so hopefully you'll be able to follow along. So on your screen, if you're playing into the special edition, you should see James Cameron and the Alien Queen Our counter says 0-2 because I literally couldn't get it synced up any better than that. So try and follow along, but when the movie actually starts, I'll start giving you a count in, and you'll be able to see it when we get to the 20th Century Fox kind of logo here. So hopefully, like I said, you guys will enjoy it. We're just going to talk about our memories of Aliens, the movie itself, some of the cool trivia. I can talk a little bit about the role-playing game from Free League, and then how me and Liam have played a lot of the new Aliens video games that have come out in the last couple of years. Because, hey, Aliens fans are eating pretty good right now. So without any further ado, I'm going to hit play on my Xbox Series X. And we're hearing Jim Cameron talk. I'm just going to turn it down so we don't get dinged for copyright infringement. Because 20th Century Fox, I'm pretty sure, is pretty litigious. But so you should see Ripley. You should see the Crawler from the Jordans. The Derelict. Should see Burke and Ripley, Amanda Ripley, Hudson, and Hicks and Vasquez and Hicks and all them, the Sentry Guns. So yeah, as far as I can tell, you should be pretty synced up. I'm going to get the clock up on the counter right now. So right now it's transitioning into the film. Your counter should read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You should see the 20th Century Fox logo coming up on your screen. And yeah, I think we are pretty much good to go. So hopefully you are synced up. This was a real special treat for me.
It's kind of brought the movie back to life for me.
Yeah,
honestly.
and it's weird because, like, I posted this on my Facebook. First off, big fucking mistake. Because people are like, oh my God, it's too clean. Movies should not exist in 4K, and the movie should have grain. And there's even a film preservationist whose name is pretty well respected, whose name I completely blank on right now, so I'm sorry. But he's like, certain movies work, and because this movie did have some artificial intelligence involved in its cleanup, it doesn't look bad. I actually appreciate the hyper detail. But when Cameron went back and did The Abyss and did True Lies, it doesn't look as good. I think here it works.
Yeah, I have yet to see those transfers, but I've heard the same complaints. And I think part of the reason this works so well is just because of how nitpicky and anally retentive Cameron was about the lighting. Mm-hmm. Like in a lot of the special features, you hear them talk about the disagreements they had with the English crew and this sort of traditional filmmaking method. When, you know, Cameron came in with his background and basically said, this is how I want it done, this is how I want it lit.
Yeah, like, there's one special feature, like, if you watch the making of, where it's called Superior Firepower, the making of Aliens, they talk about the director of photography, and Cameron had a disagreement. He wanted the scene in the alien hive to be lit by their lamps on their shoulders, which are these mining lights. And the director of photography is giving it this like 3-point lighting system. He's like, no, that's not scary. I don't want to see detail. But with this movie, when you get detail, like for example, looking at the Narcissus right there, I'm picking out hyper detail on stuff I'd never noticed before. Like I'm looking, I can see the windows there. I'm seeing display panels I've never seen before. The dust has like a texture to it. The depth of clarity in this 4K transfer, I think, adds something to it. People say it takes away. No, like for example, Liam, you and I will definitely talk about the scene later, but when they're in the alien hive, we were noticing how the smart gun was functioning, stuff we'd never seen before, and we've seen this movie hundreds of times by now.
Yeah, and I mean, we've both seen it across multiple formats, but I mean, me in particular, I used to own the special edition of this on Laserdisc, which that's a treat to watch. But the thing is, thinking back to watching this on, you know, a bad VHS copy that came off of the TV or the actual decent VHS tapes at the time, you just sort of accepted that it was dark and there was some stuff that you couldn't really see, and that worked well because that was the intention of the film.
But here, like, it looks like this was literally made yesterday, and it's not bad. Like, I don't think you're really losing much at all. I think it kind of adds to it. Like, it looks like any good modern sci-fi movie, and it really just adds to the authenticity of things. for it to work as well as it does. And I think something like that is to be commended, because you want people to appreciate what's being done with older movies. And not every movie needs to be in 4K. Let's be crystal clear on that. Some transfers work. Not all do. Like, for example, is there any reason for... I'm trying to think of a movie that doesn't need to be in 4K. I don't know. I'm trying to think of another 1980s movie.
Mac and Me.
Mac, yeah. Why do we need a 4K transfer from that? And you know what's weird? I think it exists. But I'm not 100% certain. Thank you, Vinegar Syndrome or somebody. But like, I don't know why you would need like, I don't know. I was gonna say Halloween, but I think there's a good 4K transfer that, or Friday the 13th. But those movies, do they need a 4K transfer? Probably not, because they weren't intended to be shot like that. Whereas with something like this, it was shot with big studio money. Cameron knew what he wanted. He knew what film stock was used, how to get the right chemical emulsion. Like, he got all the tech details down, because I know when he worked under Roger Corman, and one of the arguments that was covered in that documentary is Cameron knows his job as well as everybody else on the crew.
Yeah, he understands how an effect shot will work, and he doesn't fear them. I think that's the resounding praise that he seems to get from the crew on this, is that he wasn't afraid to go with the effect shot, whereas, a director who maybe didn't understand how puppets and everything worked, would have said, oh no, we don't cut that entire sequence out. We don't want to, have to worry about having some Alaskan king crab looking thing crawling across the floor.
Yeah, like there's one anecdote that Galian Hurd is talking with some Fox executives, and they're just going into the hive. This is right after James Remar, I think, has been replaced as Hicks. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you can't spend all this money on sets. Where's the effect shot? That like you can't spend this money. And she kind of had a chuckle. It was like, that is the effect shot. That's a miniature and a matte painting. And they're like, oh. So it's kind of impressive that happens. Also, so we're seeing Paul Reiser here as Burke. And if you follow comic books right now, Adam Goldberg, yes, that guy who writes the Goldbergs TV show, is writing this book with Paul Reiser right now. It's a what if Burke had survived.
Yeah, this is a wild idea.
Yeah, like it's as of this recording, it's 2 or 3 issues in, and it's very, very interesting. Had Burke lived, it involves synthetics and him doing some like other crazy stuff. It's kind of cool. Like I appreciate the fact that they're trying to do the what if alien stories, but it's not like what if Hudson survived or what if the attack had been successful or whatever. It's not the story I would have necessarily chose to tell, but I'm fine with it all the same.
Well, I think one of the great things about the Aliens universe, the franchise as a whole, is this sort of backdrop of corporate malfeasance that's always going on. It's not just, here's, a lived-in space environment. It's here's a lived-in space environment, and, by the way, corporations run everything.
Yeah, and like if you want a really good insight into this, and this is where I have to send, like, sometimes when a property like this is super successful, it gets adapted into other mediums, and one of the most successful I think has been Free League Publishing. They are the guys who do Monkborg, not Kids on Bikes, Tales from the Loop. They do Dragon's Bane, I think it is, and a bunch of other RPGs. But they're most famously known for, I believe right now, is the Aliens RPG. And they've done such a good job of world building and building out what was built in comic books, movies, even the video games and the toys. Like, I loaned Liam some of my books for the Colonial Marines. The Stingers in one of the books. And that's the stupid toy that has the capture claw for the bull alien and all this stuff. Like, it's kind of nutty how much this world has been expanded into the expanded universe. And now when you look at, corporate society now, Weyland Yutani's not that impossible with like bioweapons research, AI. Like, you look at how some of the later movies with Ridley Scott delve into the David character and the birth of AI and artificial intelligence and all that stuff, and all the questions that asks rather about the engineers and the nature of humanity and blah 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 blah. Someone's going to find a way to exploit humanity's greatest wonder, and that, you know, created in his own image. How could you be so vain, sort of thing. But at the same time, corporate profit is the end of the day, and Weyland Yutani doesn't care about what happens to the ordinary person. Like, I don't know, Liam, if like you read this, but in one of the RPG books, they talk about what it takes to be a colonist in Weyland Yutani, and you have certain rights. But if you're willing to sell those rights, you can get a little bit more money for your colony expansion. But let's say you don't live up to your potential while you go to LV 263 or whatever, they can turn off your hypersleep pod as you are drained on resources, and it's completely legal.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of the comics that I've read bits and pieces of them, and I think there's a character that they randomly associate it with Vasquez. I think Vasquez was his aunt, and he talks about how his parents were on, I believe it was his parents, on a Weyland colony flight, and they had their freezers turned off on the way back, so Weyland wouldn't have to pay them.
Yeah, like, it's crazy when you start reading into some of the expanded universe stuff, and while not all of it is created equal, there's some really good stuff out there. I know right now on Audible, you can hear the original William Gibson treatment for Alien 3 read by Michael Biehn, I want to say. Lance Hendrickson's in it.
Oh, yeah, it's so worth listening to. I mean, them performing it is a real treat, and even just listening, like the book itself, you the way Gibson kind of takes how the alien spore moves and literally kind of turns it into a spore that we saw that in Covenant, the little puffballs.
Yeah.
I really kind of like the idea how he changed it, and there would have been some really striking scenes in that.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You know, the graphic novel adaptation of it, there's this one point where this woman has been exposed to the pathogen and actually literally transforms in real time into a xenomorph.
See, that is friggin' sick how they, like, do that kind of stuff. Again, the expanded universe is so interesting. Now, there's something kind of cool about this scene here. Like, this introduced the idea that this takes place in the Blade Runner universe, because if you start reading the files behind them, I know it's outlined. There's a book, I think it's called the Weyland Yutani Report, where you can read those slides and stuff like that. And it talks about Lambert being, like, she may be transgendered and she changed her her expression, or maybe she's a synth or some shit like that. I know they talk about the Tyrell Corporation.
Yeah, there's a reference in Dallas's file that his last job was with the Tyrell Corporation, and that's probably somebody who was, you know, thought they put in a cheeky little in-joke and has inadvertently created this argument.
Yeah, I mean,
that both franchises exist in the same universe.
I mean, it's so cool though. I mean, it makes kind of sense. I mean, replicants being the natural evolution of the artificial person, and even when you play some of the video games like Alien Isolation, they talk about working Joes. When you play Aliens Fireteam Elite, there's working Joes. There's combat synthetics, even though in Alien or in Aliens here, Bishop says they can't harm humans because there's something in their programming.
Yeah, behavioral inhibitors.
But you see the Sikhs and working Joes go nuts and they kill people. Ash went nuts, but that was maybe a subroutine that was programmed into him when they find something. And that's another thing too. So there's a weird side book that happens between Alien and Aliens where Ripley wakes up but gets her memory wiped because Ash infected the Narcissus.
Yeah, is that River of Pain?
Or something like that, yeah. Like, it's a weird side story, like, that just never gets brought up.
Yeah, and it's sort of unremarkable. It's like there was a real glut of books from the expanded universe that came out, and I'm pretty sure I used to listen to a lot of books on tape, and I still sort of do on YouTube, but
I'm starting to do that now.
Yeah, I'd listen to them in the background, and I realized, like at one point, that I'd actually listened to one entire book, and I thought I was still listening to it several hours later, but it had actually gone into a completely different book with completely different characters, but the scenarios were so similar that I'm like, is this the same book?
Yeah, it's funny. Like with Aliens, the universe, I love the Xenomorph. I love the story of Ripley and the Colonial Marines. The thing is, and I love this franchise, that's very, very clear, it's hard to tell a good expanded universe story that doesn't seem to riff on the original. Which, again, the role-playing game gives you options to do stuff, because I know two of the things that have been done, there's a couple of box sets done by Free League called Heart of Darkness, and there's Heart of Darkness and Destroyer of Worlds. By the way, fun fact, I'm an NPC in Destroyer of Worlds. I die horribly, by the way. I think I get killed by the pathogen. I think someone carpet bombs the colony with it or some shit like that. It's been a while since I've read it, but totally available at Free League's website. But yeah, like it's weird with like some of these books. Some of them are really interesting and some of them are not. I know on Spotify right now, there's a couple of the Alien books.
I'd highly recommend Bug Hunt. It's actually a collection of short stories, and it's some of them are really like nice bite-sized takes on the universe. There's a particularly good one that's all about the invention of the pulse rifle.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is cool. And like I like it when you can do short stories and they're interesting. Like way back in the day, and I'm talking,
oh my god, these miniatures look awesome.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but just wow.
Like look at the detail on the side of the crawler. And something that I found out, a lot of these miniatures, part of the set here that was built, part of this is from Supergirl.
Yeah, actually, basically because it was an active studio and they were building sets and breaking down sets all the time. Like they'd have so much stuff to throw out that they just put it in a pile and burn it. There was a corner of the lot where they just burned stuff. And so when it came to, creating I call them miniatures, but it's, what did Peter Jackson call them in Lord of the Rings? Bigatures. Basically a gigantic miniature. And they go and they take like all this burnt, ruined, rusted rubble from other sets and used it to kind of make it all look a little more lived in.
Well, yeah, because think about it, you don't have to ask the art department to weather it. It naturally is rusted and burned and scratched.
I believe the hallways here, what they did is they went to a company that specialized in making the backs for televisions and VCRs, and they'd have all their ones that they couldn't use, so they basically have to throw them out. But they ended up just putting them like end on end together to make these hallway panels.
Oh, that's really cool. I never knew that. And there's so many little things that the art department doesn't get nearly enough kind of credit for. I mean, look at those are Weyland Yutani barrels. I saw so much Weyland Yutani uniforms, lab coats, all these little things too. And like, it's really fucking impressive when you really look at the scope of how these movies are made. Now, I'm like, obviously movies that are like the big Marvel and DC, there's little Easter eggs hidden in everything. Like, ooh, that guy's a SHIELD agent, or that guy works for Hydra. But here, the universe feels real, really authentic in a way that I don't think many 1980s movies really had that eye for kind of detail. And that feels like totally a Cameron thing. Like, he wanted this universe to feel authentic, to build upon what the original Ridley Scott film did. And he had the right conceptual artists to work with him, the right people who were in the art department and everything. And it's amazing how much work was done to make this bigger and badder than the original movie.
And like he had that special kind of mind that could take this and really run with it. And because he was obsessed with every little thing, and trying to figure out how everything would look. I think that's why you can kind of see it.
Like there's so much that this movie does and does right that I don't know. Like I really feel you don't get films like this genuinely anymore. Like they're always big studio productions, and yeah, they're cool and some of them are okay, but I don't get the sense of wonder that I used to. And I'm not saying that because the 80s were the most superior area of filmmaking. No, I'm not saying that at all. But when you get the right director who cares about the property and the film that they're making, you're going to get stuff like this. Like, you're not going to get this out of a Zack Snyder.
No.
Maybe the guy who did Dune.
Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, that you would get because there's a lot of cool shit in there. Like, for example, I didn't know there were mentats in the first Dune. I'd never noticed that until I was like, oh yeah, that guy's eyes went white and he blinked and he was accessing something. Whereas in the second movie, there's some shit in there hidden. If you know anything about Dune Messiah, they're starting to layer things down in that movie. But you're not going to get this out of your Zack Snyder's. Maybe the Russo brothers, maybe the guy who did Spider-Man, but I don't know. Just there's something different about this, and I'm fairly optimistic for Alien Romulus. I mean, as of this recording, that trailer dropped a couple of weeks ago, and I think it looks cool. I don't know when it takes place. I think it takes place before the first Alien movie.
I think it might take place in between the first movie and this movie.
Okay. Which is, fine. That's cool.
Yeah. And, like, the rumors flying around, is there going to be a digital Ian Holm in it and whatnot, I figure I'm going to go in with reasonable expectations. I actually, the last two films, I've come to enjoy them.
Yeah, same. I enjoy Covenant more than Prometheus, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like I can watch them and I can find the nitpicks that everybody has with them. Like, oh, they're the worst archaeologists and scientists ever because they're completely stupid and they do this and this and that. And it's like, have you watched the other movies in the series?
I mean, like,
these are not. The Alien is not the humans are so smart and we do good in space. No, it's humans are stupid and space is big and scary and full of bugs that want to lay babies in our bellies.
Like, seriously, the only smart person in these movies is fucking Ripley, because literally in the first movie she says, we break quarantine, we die. Look what happened.
Yep. Roll credits.
Yeah, like, seriously, like, do you want to be entertained by a fucking movie or not? And again, like, you get some really great characters in this. Like, I mean, obviously Burke, the slimy corporate goon who's only interested in profit and fucking each other over for a percentage. Gorman, I think I've really come to appreciate this character more as time has gone on, because, like, you're supposed to not like him, but
Gorman is a schlub.
Yeah, like, he's in the impossible situation. He's a career officer, which is fine, but he's untested. So who better to send on the job to make himself look good? And again, he's not doing it because he's mean or a bad guy. Weyland just says, like, hey, we want you to do this because you're very special. We need you to do this. We don't care that you're not experienced. This is a chance to prove yourself. It's slimy corporate tech. It's literally greasing the palms. Gorman's just as much a victim as anybody else in these movies. Now, does he make some decisions that get people killed? Yes. But he's not Burke, where he did it because he knew something was out there.
Yeah, I mean, one overarching theme I've found in the expanded universe stuff is that the Colonial Marines are always sort of bedraggled. They never have enough manpower. Their equipment is never good enough, mainly because it's all made by Weyland Yutani, and they, don't stand behind their products.
Yeah, like, I know, like, I recently finished Fireteam Elite, which takes place like 30 years after this movie.
Yeah, it basically updates all the weapons and all the armor and everything to a lot of the changes they make are smart because when it comes down to it, like a lot of the stuff in this movie, it looks really cool, but in like real world practical terms, having something a sawed-off shotgun bolted to a submachine gun that shoots, grenades, is not a particularly good idea. And in the Fireteam Elite, you were mentioning it, a lot of people got upset because the pulse rifles didn't have the
underbarrel grenade
launcher. And they address that in the Pathogen DLC. You can unlock a pistol that basically Armot, the company that manufactures the pulse rifle, when they refitted all the 41As and removed the grenade launchers, they turned them into basically a little 4-shot grenade pistol thing.
See, that makes a little bit more sense because a grenade launcher, that's not an insignificant amount of weight to add to a weapon that makes the weapon profile larger. And first off, so allow me to address the elephant in the room. Liam is a former person from the military who knows a lot more about shit than I do, understands weaponry. I understand fictional shit, and everything I've learned from them. So you're a wonderful teacher. But it's stuff people don't think about. Like, you think, like, oh, I'm going to have this big fuck you grenade launcher. That shit's heavy.
Yeah.
And do you want to trust a person who's paranoid in a situation where they're going to fire off a grenade launcher? No.
Well, that's the... Going back to Fireteam Elite, I know the problem that a lot of people have is friendly fire in that game, especially when like half your weapons are incendiary, so you're firing a flamethrower, and then you've got autocannons and grenades, and you're in an enclosed space. And grenades in an enclosed space is not a very
bad
good
news.
idea.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I mean, like, I am the biggest M41 pulse rifle fanboy you'll ever meet. In fact, your text tone on my phone is the pulse rifle firing. But yeah, it's like, it's cool weaponry, but it doesn't always make a lot of sense. And again, going back to the Superior Firepower documentary, Cameron's talking about the BDU, which is the battle dress uniform of the Marines, and he asks Bill Paxton at one point to run down the hallway in the armor and jump into a wall.
Yeah. And
Terry English, the armor from the movie, is like, all right, yeah, sure, it'll be fine. Hits the wall, armor falls apart. And Cameron goes, okay, it's not good enough. I need something a little bit more, like, kind of rugged.
This is a great shot because you can see on the far left, those two banks of rifles are actually they're British issue assault rifle.
Are those weird kind of bullpup ones?
Yep, they're a bullpup. I think in universe they're I think they're a Weyland Yutani rifle, the heavy assault rifle, Type 88. But yeah,
which I think you get in Fireteam Elite.
I'm pretty sure you can actually get that one, and there's a bunch of other Weyland Yutani rifles you can get, which one of them, famously in the books, it's called the Storm Smart Rifle, I think, and basically had an issue with going into DRM lockdown, and if it couldn't communicate with the satellite, it would stop working. And Weyland Yutani blamed it all on the Marines abusing the rifle, and not the fact that basically if you dropped it, it stopped working.
You know, there is something that this I thought was really cool. So there was a book that was published either late 90s, early 2000s, and it's been reprinted a bunch. I think it stays in publication for the most part, and I think you have my copy right now.
Oh, the technical manual?
Yeah, the tech manual. So everybody loves the smart gun because it can it can automatically track targets. We've all played the Alien versus Predator games by Rebellion, and I can't remember if that was the developer of the first two. Anyway,
I believe so.
Like, you think it's really cool, and I remember one time asking you, like, we were talking, you know, how the weapons work, and I asked you, like, how would you fire this gun prone? Because unless you take off the entire unit, you can't. But in the book, it shows you how. Yeah,
and it's really funny because I was looking at that in the book, and I'm like, I've seen this before. I know I've seen this before. And I realized that when I was reading the special thanks for that book, one of the guys he thanks is an English officer who helped them work out the firing positions of the smart rifle, the smart gun. And I figure it must be because he knows English.
The MG42.
Well, and no, English musketry is
where
the weird position comes from, where you're basically laying down on your back flat and resting the barrel on your foot and aiming with it all the way down your body. It's a very bizarre position. But
it's weird too, but it makes sense with the arm that's on the smart gun. It folds up to match you laying down prone. It won't get in the way. And that's another thing too that I really appreciate about how the weaponry functions in this movie. And Cameron talks about it. He didn't want to do phasers and pew pew.
Yeah.
He wanted something that seemed like more Vietnam era weapons. So when Drake and all them are in the hive in about 15, 20 minutes, you see him quickly take off that gear. Like it's rapid, I guess, what's the word am I looking for here?
Quick release.
Yeah, and it just, boom, it's gone.
And it's designed like that. And it's actually interesting because they address that in another book I'm listening to right now is the follow-up that's all about Bishop. And they talk about how if you get splashed with armor, you basically have 30 seconds to get it off or you're cooked. And they talk about the quick releases.
Like one of the, I was in college. I was taking a writing course a couple of years ago, and this was one of the first stories you edited for me. I did a alien short story.
Oh, I remember that one.
And I went into a lot of detail about the weapons, obviously because I'm a dork. But I was reading how big the smart gun was, and I sent it to another friend of mine, my friend Michelle. She's like, "There's no way there's a gun that's a meter long," and I'm thinking, "You don't know firepower." First off, and because you watch how Drake and Vasquez, when they're walking through the hallways here, how those Marines move with those weapons.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta stop this scene. So, this knife, Liam got me this exact knife. Tell them how you got me this knife, because you gave me this for Christmas.
It's kind of a funny story because I had I'd sort of been like just tangentially looking for one of these knives that it looks like it's a Gerber, but it's a different company. I believe Parker Brothers, and there's another Japanese company that manufactured them. And I found this model on eBay, and I managed to get it. And this was right around the time they were bringing in the global shipping program. And even though everything got approved and I paid for everything and it was all like above board, as soon as it got to their shipping center, all of a sudden they decided, oh no, this you can't have this. So we're seizing it. And so it just went poof. I found it and it was gone. And that same thing happened the next year, and eventually the knife that I did end up giving you is a slightly smaller model, but still made in Japan. They're lovely little Japanese steel daggers that became really popular in the 80s.
Yeah. So to say that I have a version of the knife that is so close to Bishop's. Now, I haven't been cocky enough to do the knife trick in about 20 years. I have done the knife trick, and I've stabbed myself fucking bad.
Yeah.
But I think we did this in high school. Didn't we do this like a couple of times? Like, hey, do you want to try this?
Yeah.
We hurt ourselves real fucking bad.
I know the knife that Hicks has wearing on his armor is actually, it's similar to the model that you have, that it's a shorter blade, but it's got a hollow handle. It's got that whole 1980s survival knife thing that everybody needed a hollow handle to put fishing line and
like matches and fishing wire and all that stupid bullshit.
Be like Rambo.
I remember, and this will kind of date how old me and Liam actually are. There used to be a store near us that sold surplus stuff. It was called Deals.
Oh, yes.
And I remember buying a knife like that had that 80s aesthetic, like that Rambo survival knife, but the handle was plastic. And I remember thinking in the back of my head, you're going to hit the wrong piece of wood, and this thing's going to shatter. And it's not. You're going to have a sharpened piece of metal, and that's about it. You won't be able to use it like at all. But again, now cool thing I like about this scene specifically is the costuming.
Oh, yes.
Because you have gone to extensive lengths to get the right patches. You have a cat hat like Spunkmeyer.
Yeah, I found somebody who was making reproduction patches, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's one thing that I always kind of liked was how it wasn't just, oh, there's a power loader. No, that's a caterpillar. And you got the greasy old Spunkmeyer is the crew chief, so he's basically a glorified mechanic.
Yeah, he's the grease monkey.
Yeah, so it kind of fits that he'd wear that.
And it's cool because, like, you look at Gorman, when he was in the dress uniform earlier, he has a USCM patch. And I had never seen that up close, really, until the Aliens Colonial Marines technical manual, operations manual that came out from Free League a couple years ago. And again, you look at all the patches here. Like, if you look at Pharaoh's kind of uniform.
Yeah, she's got the Sulaco patch, which it's the ship patch, and it has their battalion and regiment. Those are all screen printed, so they're not actually embroidered. And I have a few examples that are embroidered. I did manage to find some screen printed ones, but yeah, it's really strange trying to track these down from like a manufacturer that I think we were having this conversation before that doesn't, you want to go and find a cool morale patch, and then you think, oh, that's great. You find something goofy, and then you start looking through the inventory, and it turns out,
I don't want to buy from you anymore.
Wait a second, this person is also selling like no step on snack and like weird mole on labe.
Yeah, we're like, what the fuck? I mean, like, we're not going to get into politics here, but let's just say there are some questionable things that I'm not buying from you, but it sucks too, because like there's some genuine talent out there in the cosplay world, but I see some weird shit too.
Yep. I lucked out. I found some really good suppliers that they specialize more in the nerdy stuff, which I think you're usually safe there.
One thing I love about the miniature in this shot, I mean, and not just that matte painting of Archeron, is because of the 4K transfer, I'd never noticed little details on the Sulaco. Like, there's port windows. You can see how the weaponry works. I think the Sulaco, is that a Conestoga class?
Yep, it's Conestoga class. And I was trying to figure out when they were first built, because they talk about the fact that the Conestogas were actually refit. Like, they were originally built as just a troop transport. And then at some point, like probably around, they mentioned something in the technical manual called the Marine 70 program. Just basically 70 years in, they decide to update everything in the core, then change everything around. So that's probably around the time they would have refit this thing to, have more weapons, more capabilities, and basically just taking people and equipment from point A to point B.
Like, it's kind of insane to think about how much effort went into making the world so believable. You're just like, oh yeah. Like, for example, when Cameron designed the power loader here, he just was like, I want a futuristic forklift.
Yeah.
And that's a guy in a suit, which is incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, the way that they worked it out is great. And I think, like, Cameron started with, like, he designed the hand parts, and then he designed the other bits, and kind of everything would come together, and they'd figure out how to do this with, the guy built into the suit that was moving, and they'd have it either suspended by a crane, or they'd have another way that they could basically just take the weight and have him move around slowly. And then they had the great little miniatures that they dropped it out of the airlock so many times and smashed it to bits, but apparently somebody hot glued it back together, and it's in James Cameron's office now, which...
I mean, like, it's beautiful when you think about it. And again, I've seen people selling replica of Frost's shirt, Peace Through Superior Firepower.
Yeah. There's actually, I think it's based on another shirt. It's the GE Model 134 minigun. And it's G, and it says, "We bring good things to light."
There was a guy who was doing set dressing, and he like on the side of the that's the Bug Stomper.
Yeah.
He wanted to do a really elaborate painting because in the Second World War, you would see planes and you just saw this most recently in Masters of Air, which is an Apple Plus show, which is it's okay. It's not as good as Band of Brothers, but sure, whatever. But
it was different. But yeah, the nose art.
Yeah, and you'd see people do like the Memphis Belle, like he wanted to have the Bug Stomper, We Endanger Species. Cool bit about this scene, before the movie started for about 2 weeks and everything, Cameron encouraged people to dress their lockers, dress their uniforms, do it like up in that Vietnam era. I know Bill Paxton tells a story about how he was painting contents under pressure on his uniform. He has his girlfriend's name and like a Japanese love knot on his uniform. Hicks's uniform was worn by James Remar before he was recast a couple days into shooting. And he's got the heart and kind of locket on it. But again, because of this superior 4K transfer, you notice things. Now, Drake on his has chicken bones or something.
I do believe they're chicken bones, yes.
Yeah, like I never really noticed the detail on those. Here, look, you could see grenades in the webbing. Never noticed that before. You can make out individual names if you look really closely on the kind of monitors. Like Hicks has been shot through the shoulder.
Yeah, I got the bullet hole with "Born Again" written around it, like little fun little stuff. Which, I mean, it's all kind of silly, but you know, they really leaned into the space Vietnam kind of aesthetic.
Yeah, and I think because I remember when you and I first became friends in the mid-90s, I remember I watched Full Metal Jacket with a friend of ours named Jamie, and I appreciated it. But when I watched it with you, I saw it through different eyes. And then watching this movie with you after seeing that, I started to notice more of the Vietnam stuff. Because again, I wouldn't call myself I liked movies. I was a movie goer, but it wasn't until I went to college I started to understand film.
Yeah.
And then as our relationship and friendship has grown, I notice things differently now. And because you and I are such huge fans of this universe, you start to notice all the little kind of nuances. I know in the doc, when they lean into the kind of Vietnam stuff, they talk about soldiers who've been out in the weeds a little too long, who've gotten a little too lax. And they talk about, you know, they have superior firepower. They can handle everything. I know there's a thing on Hicks's armor where there's like a big red heart, and that's like a bullseye that they were kind of joking about. And, you know, as you would say, it's kind of silly bugger, but people would probably do that because they think they're invincible.
No, well, you look at the all the helmet art that was genuinely going on during the Vietnam conflict, and there was some funny stuff. Like graffiti goes back to Roman times, and it's, you know, people blowing off steam, and a lot of times you can get away with it. Yeah, I mean, like, in your time, did you ever see anything personally when you were in the armed forces? Or well, I mean, to be clear, I'm peacetime. Yeah, peacetime. But did you ever see anybody allowed to do that, or was that like you can't do that? Well, you couldn't go around writing stuff on your uniform because people would get mad, or it's against regulations, I guess. Yeah, there's a uniform code and regulations in effect that are like, you know, if you're walking around the base, you can't have like a slogan written on you or whatnot. See, that's something that people, I think, get from movies like me. We just assume we see movies like this, or we see, like, I don't know, Black Hawk Down or something, and we just, that's the view of the military we get, which is obviously very skewed in fantasy. But I always wondered how that stuff worked, because, like, I've got friends of mine that are former armed forces. I got friends of mine that are cops, and I'm like, well, it's like this in a video game. Why isn't it like this in real life? And again, you can't always take that one-to-one knowledge and translate it. It gives you an idea, but don't ever try to talk to someone and think you know what the fuck you're talking about. Actually, one thing I forgot about too is the skull with the Or Glory underneath. That's actually the insignia of the Queen's Own Lancers, a British regiment.
Really?
Although they added the little dagger on the top though, but thought that was a nice touch.
That piece of artwork, if you play Aliens Colonial Marines, which is the game that came out on the 360 and the PlayStation 3, if you find Hicks's pulse rifle, that's on it, which I thought was really cool. And again, that's a really nice touch for that video game. You can find all the weapons from these guys, even though the colony's been supposedly nuked, and you can just find Vasquez's smart gun just hanging out in the front yard.
Just don't think about it too hard.
Yeah, I mean, have fun with it, but realize, Yeah. But yeah, like, it's cool things like this too. Like, I remember I had this speech memorized where Hicks is where Hudson's talking about all the cool weapons and everything, and like the phalanx. And again, they detail that in the role-playing game, what kind of damage that can actually do. Like, they actually like, I remember this, and this is, I thought, was the dumbest thing ever, but it was so smart too. So if you pre-ordered Aliens Colonial Marines from GameStop, you got a weapon called the Sharp Stick. Yeah. And it was like it was like this fucking weird acronym for something. Yeah. And it was like a gun that shot like flechettes or some bullshit. And there was like Sharp Stick grenades too. It was dumb, but pre-order now to get the pre-order bonus.
Yeah, that was the height of the pre-order madness, I think.
Oh God, yeah. This is something I never even thought about this. So as they're flying through the complex, I never thought, like, I know that's a mini, I know some of that's a matte painting. I never considered that the sky was not real. I just thought it was like, oh, they went outside on a cloudy day. No, that's a painting too that moves.
Yeah, no, it's all an effect shot.
Like, that's fucking crazy. Like, sure, Captain America dropping, throwing his shield, and Iron Man jumping around, that's cool. But it doesn't have the weight that this does in a very weird way. Like, you really believe that they're in that troop. Like, that's a mini shot. And there's a scene where they're coming into the hive, which they're probably going to do in like about 10 minutes or so. Because that is a airplane hauler or something.
Yeah, it's for hauling 747s around on a tarmac.
So there's a scene where they're coming into the atmosphere processor, and it looks like they're deploying out of it. And they say, because there's no way in hell you're putting anybody in there, like the driver's crammed in there like a sardine, but they come around the side of the vehicle, and your brain just assumes, oh yeah, they're like deploying. Now, this scene right here, this is a scene that I remember seeing a lot as a kid. Not because I watched this movie a shit ton. I did. But this scene where Apone gets Hudson to run a bypass, and you'll see Vasquez at the door with the smart gun. This was featured in every single Kenner Aliens toy commercial for years, because you would have this over-the-top announcers like, and then we have the Space Marines fighting against the evil bugs. Get the Marines right here, and it would be this shot. Apone looks up, and it would cut away. And this informed so many ideas as a kid for me of what an action movie could be. Like, in all honesty, this was how I saw a good action movie. It had a really cool setting, really cool weapons and soldiers and tough guys, but the tough guys were not invincible. Because you think about the 80s action movie, for example, like you think of John Matrix from Commando, you think of Cobra with Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, everybody basically has a bullet shield.
Yeah, or like fucking Rambo. I mean, hell, even Rambo 2, which Cameron was involved in, whatever. But here, your guys are tough, but they're vulnerable. I had never seen a movie where so many people who were so well equipped, who were considered to be these technological and superior firepower, die. And I can't think of many, maybe Starship Troopers, but even then, the only person who really dies is Dizzy and the asshole pilot. and I guess the sniper guy. But Neil Patrick Harris lives, and Gary Busey's son lives,
Yeah.
and Casper Van Dien lives. That's different. And it's weird. Like, I guess the only other movie I could say that left a really big impact on me, but I guess Paul Verhoeven, was Starship Troopers, but it's not Aliens. Like, that movie's clearly trying to say something, because that's based on a very interesting novel from the 1950s.
Yeah, the novel itself is quite different.
Yeah, very much so. Like, I remember reading that. I think I was pretty sure I was in high school, or maybe it was like a year or two afterwards. And then I saw the TV show called Roughnecks, and I just never got into that. But I remember there was like a big rumor for years. You'll probably be able to talk about this too. Do you remember how there were like animated stills from like a commercial that there was supposed to be like an Aliens animated series, but it just never happened?
Yeah, Aliens Adventure, or Adventure Aliens, or something like that. But
Yeah, and there was even a thing. Do you remember last year someone had told Fox or Disney that there was a completed Alien versus Predator anime, but they'll never release it because of like a tax write-off or something?
Yeah, I read something about that as well, which, I mean, talking about corporate malfeasance.
Yeah, like,
It's like entire movies that people are like, oh my God, Michael Keaton is going to play Batman in the Batwoman movie.
yeah, nope. It's in a vault, dickhead. And the thing is, it's supposedly been wiped off a hard drive, and you have to wonder how many projects. Because I remember after Alien Resurrection, there was talk for years to get Sigourney Weaver back in an Alien 5. I remember when Neil Blomkamp was very much in the conversation. Even Michael Biehn was being talked to for a little while. And it seemed like for a year or two, this was going to happen. And then whatever. And that's the thing with the Aliens movies. I mean, we talked about Prometheus and Covenant earlier, and how we've grown to like those movies. We've sort of accepted them for what they are. But with these sequels, it's so hard, because I think Alien 3 does get better with each rewatch. And I think it's called the producer's cut or the director's cut.
Is that the one with the ox?
Yeah, the one with the ox, not the dog alien.
Yeah.
Which, again, cool. I also love Charles S. Dutton, because he's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
and
I
Charles
think that's... Like, the cast in that is so underused, I feel. And just, like, you hear about the concept of what the film was originally supposed to be, like the wooden
Planet,
Death Star
that's
with
so cool.
the monks and everything. And I mean, guaranteed, if that movie would have been made, there still would have been people talking about today about how ridiculous it was, and how they were thinking about making a version of it with prisoners. It would have been so much better.
Yeah, like, it's fucking wild. And another movie I've actually really grown to love in the last couple of years, because I've rewatched it a few times from a different perspective, is Alien Resurrection has a really strong cast.
Oh yeah, well that's the director. I'm probably going to butcher the name.
Rennie Harlan, wasn't it?
No, not Rennie Harlan.
No, who the fuck?
Jean-Paul Jeannot.
That's it, yeah.
Who did City of Lost Children, Delicatessen. The really, like, amazing films. But, he did them with, I know Ron Perlman was in City of Lost Children, and I believe...
What is that movie about? I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
I've watched it, and I still don't know what it's about.
Yeah.
It's almost like a French Neil Gaiman story, if I can describe it like that. It's dark, but also whimsical.
Okay, weird.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah, honestly, like, I'm blanking on it. I remember Delicatessen. That's one I remember more, because I saw that on Saturday night at the movies when I was like 10 or something and didn't know what was going on.
Okay, so to our listeners around the world. So up
Yes.
here in Ontario specifically, where me and Liam live, is Southern Ontario, Canada. There used to be, there is a public broadcaster called TVO, which is Television Ontario. And they used to have a show hosted by this man who has now since passed his name was Ellie Yost. And he used to do this show called Saturday Night at the Movies, which was a public broadcaster showing you all kinds of movies.
So many good films.
Now, the cool thing about this is his son, I can't remember the son's name, but he went on to write the movie for Keanu Reeves called Speed. And when that show went off the air, Saturday Night at the Movies, sometime in the mid-90s, the last movie he ever shown, and this was arguably the biggest blockbuster they ever showed on TVO, was Speed. So there's a little bit of random trivia for you to just kind of take back to wherever. Okay, so back to the movie for a second. But, okay, so this 4K transfer, I'm noticing all sorts of shit in operations I never noticed before. And it's just, sure, it's probably just little dumb set dressing that they took from, like, a medical lab, but I have never noticed some of this stuff before. And again, it's just random stuff in a set, but I love looking for little things like that. Like in the background, like, hey, there's a microscope I never saw before. There's something under that desk I never noticed before. And even the face huggers here, the puppets are slightly different than they were in the Alien movie from 1979. I remember there's a story they tell, one of the puppets, when it gets close to Burke and it jumps out at him here in just a second, it actually scared the actress that played Newt, Carrie Hine. And James Cameron's like, oh, finally, we got something to finally scare you on this picture. Which, again, that just goes to the magic of filmmaking when you can make something that effective.
It's a great jump scare.
Yeah, like, and to think about that thing being stuck down your throat and depositing something in you, like, again,
Yeah, they didn't really quite sell the horror of the ovipositor in the first film, but certainly in this one, they're like, yeah, no.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Actually, there's a channel on YouTube that you guys should really check out. The channel's name is Alien Theory. This guy is easily one of the best alien knowledgeums that exist out there. And there's a theory that the alien is somewhat indestructible, and it's backed up by Ridley Scott. It could just be an offhanded comment. But he's talking about how in Alien Covenant, there's a scene where they're fighting on top of the ship and it's escaping, and they talk about the alien getting crushed and bits and pieces of it falling back down to the planet. But he talks about it, how those parts would regenerate over time. And there's a part in the Alan Dean Foster novelization of Alien where Ash is talking to Dallas and the rest of the crew about the facehugger, and they're talking about the splash damage from hurting the alien, how it burned through the hull. Yeah. And they talk about if they encounter this alien in a hallway, they don't know how to kill it. Yeah. Because if you don't drop it in one shot, its alien blood's going to splash everywhere and kill everything. Because they're like, we don't know where its vital spot. Okay, I never noticed that. There's something hanging off the end of Drake's gun.
Yeah, I think he's got a charm or something, or more chicken bones.
Awesome. So he was the first COD weapon charm. Actually, I'm actually really surprised that's not ended up in COD. Although there was a DLC, I can't remember what game it was for. I want to say it was for Modern Warfare, the one that came out in 2019. There was a kit that was named Space Marine, and they tried to do a version of the M41, and they tried to do a version of the smart gun using like the M60 frame. Obviously, yeah, they did use it using the M60 frame because it said adios on the side.
Nice.
In fact, fun fact, when me and Liam used to play a lot of COD together, we would play a lot of Nuketown. You would lock down the one side of the map, and I would sit there and shoot at the one house because I would always bring in the heavy machine gun, and I knew people would spawn in that section, and we would get so many wallbang kills. And do you remember the really fucked up messages we get from kids telling us off?
Oh, it was so much fun. Just because, I mean, like, I remember playing that map for the first time back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And, like, I can respect people who get into the Twitch gaming and can, like, run around at high speed the entire match and get all kinds of kills, but my brain doesn't work like that. Like, I started with an Atari 2600 and a Timex Sinclair, whereas, like, you had a little square on the screen that moved from point A to point B and did stuff, and that was amazing technology. It's like, if there's a game that's photorealistic and has all this stuff in it, but there's a spot on the map that I can basically just sit and wait for people to walk into my gun sites, I'm going to do that because I'm old and lazy.
You and I would defeat people by tactics, and that's what I used to love about just pissing people off like that. And again, it's just one of those random things you just kind of that just come up during a random DVD commentary. Again, I'm looking through Newt's cave, or her little hideaway here, her little cave. I'm just looking to see what has she been surviving on. There's actually a really cool novel. Or not, yeah, there is a novel. I think it's called Newt's Tale.
Yeah.
And River of Pain has some stuff. And there's a comic book that came out in the 90s that explains what happened when the call went out for the Jordans to go out to the derelict. Hadley's Hope fell within a matter of like 3 days. Like, it was not long.
Yeah, you wouldn't really expect them to last that long. Like, I know a lot of the expanded universe stuff, it talks about like there'll be a Colonial Marine detachment, but it's if
there's
you're
like
lucky,
a marshal with like a gun, maybe.
Yeah, you usually just have like security personnel and people that may have some kind of training, because they don't. One, you don't really you want to expect stuff to go wrong, but it's going to cost money to have people out there to look after stuff.
Yeah.
And if stuff doesn't go wrong,
they're just sitting on their hands the whole time.
Yeah, the company can justify saying, well, you don't need an entire detachment. You can have like, a crotchety old sheriff with a shotgun.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because they kind of touch upon that in Fireteam Elite. If you find pieces of intelligence that you can find around the level when you go visit the quartermaster, he'll start giving you details about that. And even in the role-playing game, the book starts to fill in those things, like Liam just said. Oh yeah, we don't need to give you a full Marine detachment. Here's a deputy, and here's a sheriff, and here's a couple of used pulse rifles, and here's maybe a shock stick or something like that. Like, they don't want colonists armed. Because out there, when you're out in these Weyland Yutani colonies, hauling stuff costs fuel. And the less stuff you have to bring, the better. So if you can be a trader, for example, like there's an entire character class built around you go to a colony and you can trade smoke, cigarettes, and booze for whatever you want because it's worth more than gold. Or if you have a flash drive that has a bunch of porno on it, you could trade that for a gun. If you wanted to.
This last season of For All Mankind, I thought they did a really good job of addressing how the black market started on Mars and on the moon, and talking about the fact that people are going to want to get their pornography and all their vices out there, but the big sellers were like foot cream to get rid of fungus and cotton underwear.
Yeah, like, it's crazy because like even in like some of the Aliens expanded universe stuff, they talk about colonists that would sell their soul for like a tube of toothpaste or like fresh shoelaces and stuff like that. Like, even Newt, you look at her clothes, like, she's in a whole colony. You could probably scavenge some stuff too, but if you're trying to stay alive for so long. And that's another thing too. Like, Hadley's Hope, as far as I understand the timeline, I think things started on like June 19th. By the time the Marines show up, it's like July 5th or like 16th, something like that.
Yeah.
Either way, it's been a few weeks. Newt has been surviving in the ducks for weeks. against these things. And how atmosphere processors work in the Aliens universe, they set up a bunch on a planet and it forces the atmosphere to transform. That's why it's always raining on these planets, because they're trying to build oceans. They're trying to build a biosphere. And where's she going to go? Like, realistically. And in the commentary, they actually, it's in the documentary. They talk about the difference between operations and the bad side of town, because as you were mentioning, the colony complex, it was built out of all, it looks very utilitarian. It's very modular. But you look at the place, like when they land in the colony, you saw that place, that's in Bar.
Yeah.
Those are empty shipping containers, because when you build a colony, well, you don't need to bring the ship containers back into space. What are you going to do with them? You can repurpose them.
Yeah.
And again, we're seeing this happen now in real life with tiny homes. Is shipping container houses. I know here where I live in the city of Guelph, we're talking about solving the homeless problem, or housing insecurity, pardon me, with using tiny homes, shipping container homes, and stuff like that. And that's kind of the way our society's kind of going right now, is repurposing old stuff, which is, again, great, because, waste not, want not. But when you live out in the fringes of fucking nowhere, you're going to have to get creative real fast. And again, in one of the expanded universe novels, they talk about the invasion of Hadley's Hope. They talk about finding a ship that might get them up in the orbit.
Yep.
The problem is it was stripped for parts like 15, 20 years ago. So it's not space worthy anymore. And that's something I think the used future of Aliens does really well. You would think, oh, why don't they just take a shuttle up or whatever? This is a colony, right? This is space, right?
Yeah.
Not if it was taken for parts. Not if you needed to fix something on this giant atmosphere kind of process or whatever.
Yeah, my favorite is that there's always like some secret corporate lifeboat. That's the scenario that I came up with for my LARP March. I leaned into that, because you got to figure there's going to be either a prison warden or the corporate head of development or something that has a way to get off the planet to basically screw everybody else, and having one of those in your back pocket is always handy.
One of the things that was really cool about this thing is when they filmed this particular thing, they got a decommissioned power station.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
it was full of asbestos, which is, long story short, bad fucking news. Basically, cancer. And they had to do air readings constantly. They said, but by the time filming was done, the air was cleaner inside this abandoned power station than it was at Pinewood Studios, which is the big complex in England where a lot of the interior stuff was filmed.
Yeah, apparently everybody kept getting sick. They just keep getting colds and flus, constantly working in this dusty environment.
Which is kind of crazy considering how cold it was. Like, there's some behind-the-scenes footage of Sigourney and Carrie Hine in the hive, and everybody's bundled up in winter coats.
Yeah.
And there they are in jeans and like a t-shirt, like fighting the alien queen and all that shit. This is the scene that the Fox execs are like, where's the effect shot? And they're like, no, that's a miniature guy. Again, I thought that was a set growing up.
Yep.
Because, again, texture. And that's something that the Aliens movies, I think, do better than most monster movies. Because the design of the xenomorph, the original Geiger design, and then when you start to get the warrior and the drone in this movie,
Yeah.
there's the skeletal text, this biomechanical stuff. And even looking at the resin of the hive, like, you can feel the stickiness just by looking at it. You can feel the weird texture to it. Like, I love how skeletal it looks. Like, this is disgusting. It's awesome.
Oh, it's nasty. And I mean, if you look at photos of the warrior costumes, as they painted them to be almost skeletal. It's a black with a kind of an off-white, bony look to it that pokes through. But because of the way it's lit, you can't quite see it, but it all looks so
Like
just gooey.
Like one of the, like as of this recording, I'm running a Dungeons and Dragons game for a couple friends of mine, and I'm putting them against xenomorphs. And what they don't know is they're going to come across a village tomorrow that's going to look like this, and I can't wait to describe that they run across orcs and goblins that are entombed to the walls. And they're going to be like, "What the fuck is that?" Because like I dropped them against a couple of juvenile drones, and I had to show them a picture of what it looked like. They're like, "Oh my god!" But I also their big fight coming up in the next hour that they have no clue. Aliens, at least in the expanded universe, and it's just kind of accepted now because we saw it in like Alien 3. Aliens take on the DNA of whatever they've assimilated.
Yep.
So I crossed an owl bear with an alien, so they're going to come across basically a version of the bull alien as far as I'm concerned, and that'll be fun. And I'm going to use the stats for a Praetorian. Yeah. So if they live, great. If they don't, well, that was a fun game, and thanks for coming out. But, and again, this, I love the idea of this, with Apone saying, we can't have any shooting in there. Give me your magazines. And I remember you and I were talking about the smart gun. We were trying to figure out what the fuck part they were taking out of their guns. And we figured it out finally, definitively.
Yeah,
that's a battery.
It's a battery.
Or a fuse.
Yeah, it's a battery to power the gun. And actually, some of the other Marines, you can see them. They have similar batteries strapped to the front of their webbing.
Is that for the light?
Yeah, chances are it's basically a universal battery unit that works for the light, works for the smart gun, works for probably the motion tracker as well. Which, I mean, it kind of makes sense that if you're going to have devices that need power, you want to have a battery that fits everything. So it's basically like a futuristic big AA or something like that.
Because, like, when I worked in television, those mining lamps, those remind me a lot of the types of lamps we'd have mounted on the top of our big over-the-shoulder cameras.
Yeah, I believe they are actually camera lights.
And those lights die fast.
Yeah, they die fast. They eat up batteries and they get really hot. So
I burned myself a few times.
I understand that they could only shoot for a certain amount of time before the lights got too hot.
Yeah, or they popped.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of crazy to, like, look at, again, some of the detail in this scene that you're now really getting the full effect of. Like, you obviously saw that person, but now you're seeing a little more detail in the face. Like, the alien eggs. Like, when Bishop was dissecting the one in operations earlier, that's, I think, chicken guts and oysters or something?
There's chicken skin in there. There's tripe, the stomach lining that's been like, they've kind of thinned it out so it looks more lacy. But yeah, and I think it looks like there's a couple gizzards or something in there too. Like, definitely some sweetbreads.
Like, it's really cool to, like, again, just it's the little details in scenes like this that really make you appreciate the horror of what you're seeing, and just, again, getting a feel for the different Marines and everything. And just, again, when Apone collects all their stuff, this is where things go from bad to worse for them, because
I mean,
their secondary weapons, they don't have a lot.
I'm assuming that this is one of the things that I shouldn't think about too much, but just walking into this situation with a single magazine, it seems like a bad idea. That seems like an oversight. Yeah,
like, it's weird. Yeah, you're right, because, like, sure, those weapons hold 100 rounds, quote unquote, but no, you'd think they'd have at least 3 or 4 spare mags on them.
Yeah, and I mean, the webbing that they have on them, they have a couple of pouches that potentially could have more magazines in them, but of course we don't see them using that.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Like, yeah, they went in with 1 mag apiece. That's not very smart.
I mean, deploying from an APC, like, the APC kind of serves as a mobile base. Your extra ammo and stuff is there, but they're pretty far from it at this point, where somebody should have said, maybe we should bring some extra ammunition just in case.
Like,
but,
hey guys, and those smart guns supposedly, I think in video games they hold 500 rounds. Yeah, no, I think we figured out the mags hold maybe 50 to 100, which is still pretty cool, but still at the same time.
I'd have to check the technical manual again, but yeah, I think it's like something, there's supposed to be like 100 or 200 round drum.
And they're pretty easy to swap out, again, but you never see it happen in the movie. And they were pointing this out the other day where they're talking about the rounds are 10 millimeter explosive tip caseless, yet you see brass flying, which is fine.
Yeah, and I mean, this was before they could take that kind of stuff out digitally. And like, there's a lot of people that allow their disbelief to be suspended and don't like look for little things like that.
Oh, yeah. And it's kind of one of the things that I think because of this movie influenced so many things like Halo, but there's even a bit of Resident Evil in here. The handgun they use is a VP-70, which is a German handgun. That's Leon's handgun from Resident Evil 2, which, again, fantastic weapon, and its big claim to fame is the VP-70 could fire a 3-round burst.
Yep.
But you needed the shoulder stock because it wouldn't fire otherwise. It was just how the firing mechanism was designed, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's a very, very weird gun that came out at a very weird time.
I think during the 1970s or something, right?
Yeah, I think it was the late 70s or something like that. And VP stands for Volks pistol, which is, I think, People's Pistol. That is, they designed it not so much as like a personal defense weapon, but as a easily, crudely manufactured gun for, just regular people to have.
Now, something we never noticed because we always had low-res VHS copies of this, when you see Vasquez and Drake with their smart guns running back, you can see the ammo belt hanging out of the side of that giant MG42.
Yeah, because they use something called a non-disintegrating link. They're basically just the bullets that are going through it, they got metal links that connect them all. So you've got this long sort of chain. Whereas like you're talking about the modern warfare M60 thing. That thing has something called disintegrating link where the shells fall out and you've got bits of metal link that fall out as well instead of the big log dangly bits.
Where's the Sarge, man? Get the fuck out of here.
I'm kind of sad that they never showed them reloading the smart gun. Like it's interesting to see how they manage it in the games as well.
Yeah, because I think you open the top of the gun and then you slap it in, and then like you see her on the drop ship crank the handle.
Yep.
But I would be very curious to know how that actually works in like kind of real life, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame we never got to see.
And this is remote controlled.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, like again, I would totally assume this was like a practical effect. Like, no, that's a little RC car, and the camera is under cranked to make it look like it's going faster.
Yeah, lots of neat little tricks. Still a shame that we never got to see any of the little chain guns or the phalanx cannons doing anything.
Yeah, like that's, again, something you don't really kind of think about with this is they've got this giant particle weapon on top of the APC and they never get a chance to use it. But again, they got overconfident, and how are you going to use a weapon like that in a small enclosed space? My favorite thing about... Okay, so before I get to that, how they got the aliens to explode like that is they were mixing different chemicals. And
the A and B smoke chemical.
Yeah, and they got it to produce that unique color. And this is what we were talking about earlier when it comes to the quick release getting out of his smart gun harness. Because you look at that, like that's armor, but that's also in the chest piece. That's the tracking software for the smart gun to function. Again, cool. Now I think partially this is what made me fall in love with Aliens is death by friendly fire. And you and I had went through this movie when we watched this a couple of weeks ago when I got the disc. Yeah. We freeze framed Drake's death on old Blu-rays, DVDs, and VHSs. That scene, yeah, you could see how fucked up the makeup was, but you never saw how devastating the wounds were. Yeah. And you saw how much Drake in that moment suffered. And Mark Ralston tells kind of a funny story how he had that torso for years and his ex-wife kept it and then at one point sold it or some shit like that.
Yeah. Apparently he was quite broken up about it because he saved all the bits like the chicken bone necklace and whatnot. And apparently it got recycled.
Which is, again, such a bloody tragedy for stuff like this. Although, I remember you and I were sitting around, I guess this would have been about a year ago or so. There's a website that shows up in Hollywood sometimes, and they do prop auctions. Whoops, and I've dropped something. That's okay. Hopefully that still works. We're going to assume.
Hope for the best.
Yep, hope for the best. Yep, we're still recording, as far as I know. Whoops. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's the dead cable. Okay, anyway. But again, seeing some of these props that would come up for auction, like I know the incinerator, the hero prop. Yeah. There, I went for something like $120,000.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Like the deactivated smart gun and things like that.
And like, I think you and I had saw, I think a Pones uniform sold, or no, Frost uniform sold last year.
Yeah.
And I know Adam Savage from Mythbusters just did something recently where they were taking a look at one of those Hollywood auctions and they were like screen matching stuff.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that out there in the world, someone has Gorman's helmet or Hicks's shotgun. Like, it exists in somebody's garage, so to speak.
Somebody has the Lance Henriksen torso from the Queen scene, apparently.
I don't know what I would do if there was, like, a torso of me that was all torn up or something.
Well, the thing looked really weird and bug-eyed when it was new.
Yeah.
And I can imagine with the latex rot and everything else happening, it looks absolutely horrific.
Oh, yeah. Like, if I was Lance, I'd be like, okay, guys, I so don't want that in my collection. Can you not?
Like, wasn't there a thing, it was a couple of decades ago, I think, somebody found in an abandoned luggage place where they sell stuff that people didn't claim. They found the Hoggle puppet from Labyrinth.
What?
Yeah, and apparently it had the latex had rotted off, so it looked like this horrible leprous thing.
Oh my God. Like, one of the things I just noticed just now, so when Burke was going over to Hicks to patch him up, I never noticed the burn. Like, there's actually, it's not just dirt, there's dressing there. Like, there's actually burn appliances. Again, little things you never would have noticed on a DVD from 1996 or whatever. Or when the Aliens Quadrology came out in that set, I want to say 2004. Yeah, I think so, because that
sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then there was the Blu-ray set that I want to say was 2011. And then this set, which just came out in March of 2024. Again, little things you never really kind of notice. I don't know. Like, there's just a level of reverence I have for something like this. And I don't know if I'll ever find a movie that resonates with me like Aliens. And the big reason is I remember this scene very, very, very clearly. When I was a kid, my mom, my real mom, Kim, had rented this movie, and there was like this little convenience store near us, or gas station, whatever, that little place near my house.
Yeah.
And I remember my real mom ordering a club sandwich, and that just sticks out in my mind crystal clear. But I remember Hudson getting his arm patched up, the red lighting of the APC, and them just escaping from the hive. But I crystal clear remember this scene and the hive attack leaving such a mark on me as a kid that I think this is why this is my childhood comfort movie. And it has never really left me as like, I can watch this movie 100 times and never get bored because I'm always noticing something. Like, for example, today I learned something new from you. I didn't know Spunkmeyer was the crew chief. I didn't know he was the grease monkey. I just thought he was Pharaoh's co-pilot, and which he is, but I also didn't realize he served a dual role.
Yeah, like I'm not sure how it is on modern aircraft or anything like that, but you saw that a lot of the Vietnam movies, they would show you'd have the pilot, the co-pilot, and you'd have the door gunners. I think maybe one of the gunners was the crew chief, or I don't know if that was a separate position, but to keep everything working properly, there needs to be a lot of people. You can't just like have a pilot flying the thing and having to look after everything else.
One of the other things I've really kind of noticed too is I like how this, like, they're not just grunts for the sake of being grunts. Like they give them ranks and roles. Like, for example, it's expanded upon, but Hudson is their comm-tech. He's their technician. Mm-hmm. Hicks, obviously being a corporal, he's second in command. And Vasquez and Drake would be the SAW soldier, squad automatic weapon.
Yep.
And, you got Pharaoh as Dietrich as the corpsman.
Yeah.
Stuff like
your medic and everything like that. Yeah.
Like, it's neat just to think it wasn't just Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
And it would have been so easy just to make this, oh, look, here's a gang of soldiers. They get their ass kicked the end of the day. Like, their roles make sense. Like, you need a technician to open doors. You need people with heavy weapons marching forward, so in case you run into something difficult, you can cover it.
Yeah. And the fact that it's all they went to the extra effort to actually plan that, not just, okay, these are Space Marines and they're soldiers in space.
Yeah, like it would have been so easy. Like in Star Trek, for example, and I say this because I write for the property, everybody has a rank, everybody has a function, and there's always the old joke, like, oh, look, there goes a red shirt. Yeah. Or whatever, but that red shirt, that's security, or that's a guy from the command staff. Like, they have to have a reason to be there, not like, here's Ensign Finger in the socket.
Yeah.
But these guys, it makes sense. And I also love how they talk about recovering stuff from the APC wreckage. So this is how they are able to somewhat fight back, but not a lot. Like, the only reason those sentry guns exist because they were in hard cases. Yeah. But because this is the 1990 special edition, this was cut out of the theatrical, which I get why, because it makes the threat of the aliens a little bit more intense. But I like the scene, even if it doesn't add a lot to it, because realistically, it's shown on a monitor and they reuse footage from the Hive, which, again, I'm fine with, but I can see why it was cut. And it's so seamless a cut here where unless you knew it was there, you would think that the sentry guns were just part of the table. Because when they cut back to that scene, you see 2 incinerators, a couple of grenades, a pulse rifle, and that's pretty much about it. Like they've been stripped of all their gear. Like, think about this. Nobody wears their sidearms. Like, Hicks has his shotgun, but it's gone.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did
did shove it in the guy's mouth, but
chances are mostly melted. At
yeah,
this
so yeah, it's
point.
probably ruined.
But I think we see. I think the only person
Vasquez
we see
has
with
a pistol.
Vasquez has a pistol. Gorman also has a pistol.
Yeah, I'm surprised why Hicks
it.
never, or not Hicks, Hudson never pulls it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we see a holster on them because I know they have the weird quilted holsters for their pistols.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. But then again, we should go back to our earlier conversation of like, why did they go into a combat situation with one mag? Don't think about it too hard, guys. Marines in space.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the thing is, if the planning part of stuff is usually what I get hung up on because it's like if I'm going on a hike someplace, I think of all the things, like not just the things that I know I'm going to need. I'm going to say, well, what if this goes wrong and I need that? And sometimes it works out, and other times you end up carrying a bunch of stuff you don't need. But like when it comes down to something as simple as, hey, let's grab, an extra box of magazines, or maybe we should have face shields or something if we're going to be going into a situation where there's things that are going to attach to our face.
Yeah,
it's little planning stuff that probably should have occurred to someone, but again, it's all foresight and sort of nitpicking.
But yeah, like there's just little things like you can like kind of think of here, like why didn't they do X, Y, Z? But then again, do you want a movie or not?
Yeah.
See, that's the first time I've seen Hicks's knife hanging off of his kind of webbing there. First time.
Yeah, he has it in a slightly different spot than Hudson. But yeah, it's...
Where is Hudson's kind of mounted?
His is much lower down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, I love this too. Again, it's such a small scene, but it shows even if they had superior firepower, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like there's so many of these things. Like again, for every one for every colonist, that's one warrior or drone.
Yeah.
And that's over 100 at least. So could they have whittled them down? I mean, no, because you think about this. They've got them bottlenecked, and they still couldn't do it. And they maybe kill, I don't know, I'm going to say less than probably 20, maybe 30, maybe. Like, not that many. Like, the numbers were so overwhelming, there's not a lot they realistically could have done in this situation. Like,
yeah, they'd eventually be overrun, which I think that's part of the horror of the Star Beast, the Space Beast, is that you're out someplace you really shouldn't be. You have limited resources. Even if you're well stocked, you have limited resources because you're on a planet in the middle of nowhere, and on that planet there's a finite number of things like seismic survey charges or
reloads,
ammunition.
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and eventually, you just got to run out of stuff. And
like, there's one system that I think is fucking genius in the role-playing game. They have a system where you have as much ammo as you need and want, but if something happens, you actually have to track it. And there are conditions which will make you empty your clip, and you'll have less resources. Like, you can run out of air, you can run out of ammunition, and it's done in a very dramatic fashion where resource management actually becomes a game mechanic.
Yeah.
And there's a game I'm playing right now on PlayStation 4, which I'm fucking terrible at. It's called Aliens Dark Descent. It's basically Aliens meets XCOM. And I have a lot of resources, but a lot of resources won't win you a war if you have bad planning. There was one mission I was doing. I was rescuing someone from an alien hive. Of my 4 Marines, I lost 2. One of my Marines had to carry somebody, which means they couldn't use their pulse rifle. They had to use a pistol. And one of them had a wound. So they were walking, not running, with this body slung over their shoulder. And there was a Praetorian wandering around. So what should have been a 5-minute extraction turned into about an hour creeping through a dungeon, hoping this thing didn't see me. And again, if that doesn't sum up the Aliens universe in a nutshell, where you can be as well armed as you want, but all it takes is bad resource management to take you out. And like you said, it's forethought, it's planning. What are you going to do? And even here, like here's Ripley planning ahead. She's like, there's not an unrealistic possibility something's going to happen to her. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put this little tracking bracelet on her, which here's something I just thought about literally in the 40 years since this movie's come out or whatever it is. Wouldn't Newt have the personal data transmitter too?
You would think.
But maybe she's too young to get it implanted. Maybe there's an in-universe explanation for that.
Yeah, there could be a possibility. And the thing is, like, granted, if she did have a PDT, she's in the hive. And if they're looking for PDTs in the hive,
it would be lost.
Yeah, there's going to be a whole bunch of them. I'm not entirely sure if they can, like, just
isolate a signal or something.
Yeah, if they can do, like, an individual one.
Like, one short story or someone to explore this. I've often, like, I've seen videos on YouTube where they talk about what if Hudson survived. I would be very curious to know what Dietrich's and Apone's last moments were like. Not because I'm a cruel sadist, but just because I would be very curious to see what the alien life cycle looked for these guys, like as they encountered them and they see the face huggers, knowing what's going to happen to them. Like, even, you know, like, to get in the Gorman's head for 10, 15 minutes, like, does he realize how badly he fucked up? Does he realize Burke put him in this situation?
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about it in its entirety, the fact that Burke has basically been using back channels to investigate the site, and now he's leading this expedition, which we can assume that there's some kind of paper trail, but do we know that he has, you know, permission or clearance to be going and doing this kind of thing?
Yeah, like in the Aliens What If story, it talks about him getting off of LV and how he sabotages the freezers and stuff like that, if I'm remembering it right. And it's kind of crazy how he gets back to Weyland Yutani. And I think in the book, what happened at LV is pinned on him, and he becomes like a pariah. Like, his family leaves him and all this crazy shit. Like, he lives with like an android. His daughter won't talk to him anymore. And he's living this horrible existence, but he survived. And it's weird how the weasel lives, but if that's any parallel to real life, it always is. The guy who doesn't deserve to live fucking lives.
Yeah, I guess the risk doesn't always live.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of crazy how, like, just little things. If you play the right weaselly role in real life, perhaps you too will survive to see another day. But, and again, the power of Sigourney in this scene, like, she should have won the Oscar this year. And I think she was nominated for Best Supporting.
She was nominated. Which I know I think they expected thing. They
Excuse me,
expected nominations for effects and whatnot, but certainly for a sci-fi movie, getting that kind of Oscar nod is not quite as expected.
Well, I think most people thought sci-fi was supposed to be like Flash Gordon and fucking Star Wars and stuff that was like, frankly, would appear on the back of like a cereal box in like, I don't know, 1940 or whatever. Like, you know, sci-fi, it was taken seriously because you would have Star Wars, you would have Alien, but the Academy doesn't like that stuff. Because crotchety old white dudes, because reasons.
Yeah.
But,
well, I think because we enjoy movies, we sort of have this rose-colored glass view of it that, you know, movies are made because people love making movies, and, movie makers and all like this. It's a magical thing, but when it comes down to it, a lot of times the company is going to be trying to turn a profit.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to turn out the franchise until it keeps making a profit, and when it stops making a profit, then you can stop making the movies. Which I think that's the Roger Corman ethos is: keep making them until they stop making money, and then you can stop making them.
Yeah, and we're kind of seeing this now with for example, I think a lot of people thought the Transformers franchise was dead for a long, long time, and then it came back reasonably strong with Rise of the Beasts, but it took a while. But when Bumblebee didn't light the world on fire, there was a not unlikely chance that we'd seen the last of Optimus Prime for quite some time. And with Alien, Covenant, I know it did okay and people liked it, but it took so long to get off the ground. I was wondering, are they just going to reboot the thing? And that's something too. I think there's something to be said when you can keep a movie continuing or a franchise continuing, but keep injecting new blood that doesn't reboot the entire fucking thing.
Yeah, because now they're calling things requels and soft reboots and whatnot, when it's like, just kind of make it exist in the same universe, but come up with something new.
Yeah.
Which, admittedly, like Prometheus and Covenant were, but I think Prometheus, because we've got that Damon Lindelof lost, it's mysterious kind of story writing thing in there.
Mm-hmm.
That poisoned the waters a little. And when people got all weird and they're like, well, is Prometheus an alien movie? Is Covenant going to be an alien movie? It's like, yeah, okay, we'll call it Alien Covenant. And then people are like, oh, we don't like this alien.
Yeah, it's I remember the discourse around that being so bloody bizarre. And I'm thinking, well, do you want an alien movie or not?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's Ridley Scott making alien movies in the universe, but it's old man Ridley Scott. It's not the fresh young maverick who had just made the Duelists.
Yeah, it's not what people expect, and that's fine. I'm all for ideas that are interesting. And I can't even make the argument say I want a good alien movie, because good is subjective.
Yeah, exactly.
I want something that pushes the lore in an exciting direction.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about requels and sequels, a good example of an idea that I think started off with potential and then turned fucking stupid. If you can recall the wonderful time that we spent together last year watching the Halloween trilogy, we shall say.
Oh, God.
Fuck. And that's, I think, an example of a franchise that started out with such a good idea. Ignoring 6 movies of continuity, yeah, sure, whatever. And Busta Rhymes, Trick or Treat, motherfucker, to hi, I'm Corey and I'm going to kill people and let's throw Michael Myers into a garbage compactor. Yeah. And after we're done, we're going to go to Bennigan's and get our story straight.
Wasn't there one with Paul Rudd in it too?
Yes, that was Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers.
Yeah, that was a weird one with the cult.
Yeah, the Cult of the Thorn, which he randomly shows up in number 4 as the guy at the bus station. And we're like, okay. Oh, yeah, and when Michael Myers gets thrown down a hole and randomly survives for a year. Again, or I think my favorite sequel of all time is for the movie we didn't see. And I made this joke with James Rolfe on a podcast a number of years ago. In Halloween 6, the same movie where, this happens, he goes to California to find Laurie Strode and kill her son. But he drives a car. So somewhere there's a road trip movie with Michael Myers driving across America from Haddonfield, Illinois to California. That's not an insignificant distance. So,
how is he getting gas? Is he just stopping at random stations and chances are, I mean, no, if he fills up the gas tank and doesn't pay, people aren't going to mess with him.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's going to be going on a murder spree. It's just going to be, okay, I have to get to point A to point B and
remain inconspicuous.
Yeah.
So I want you to entertain this thought experiment. Michael Myers obeying local traffic laws. Michael Myers obeying school zone speed zone limits.
maybe he like tries to wear a disguise, puts on like a fishing hat and a vest or something.
No, the fucking hat, fucking mustache, and just driving across the country. That's the Michael Myers movie I want to see right there. But yeah, like with the like Alien franchise, like I think Alien Romulus has the best chance of injecting life into it. The more I read about the TV show, the more I'm worried. And because it's supposed to be set before the first Alien, okay, fine. I don't need a xenomorph in every episode.
Yeah.
Because I think about it like Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And what I mean by that is there was a phrase that was uttered around the time S.H.I.E.L.D. came out. It was like, it's all connected.
Oh, God.
And they would always say, oh, yeah, the big guy, the Battle of New York. And they'd always talk about events that had happened, but you never saw Bruce Banner show up. You got like, here's random side character. Oh, here's Lady Sif, or here's the great value version of the Absorbing Man. And sure, it happens in Marvel, but you don't give a fuck. But here's Coulson, so that's cool. So my guess is when this, I think it's Noah Hawley who's doing it. Mm-hmm. When this Alien series comes out, it's supposed to show the formation of Weyland Yutani. Here's my prediction. First season, if successful, we are going to get a Lance Henriksen cameo on a phone at least as Peter Weyland or whatever.
Well, I think because speaking of weird continuities between universes, Alien versus Predator, the first film we had, he was supposed to be a Weyland in that one, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And that was, I don't think it was Weyland Corp or Weyland. It might have been Weyland Corporation at that point. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, come Alien 3, when he shows up in the flesh, he's Michael Bishop, who is he designs AI. He's designed the Bishop android and a bunch of other ones. So it's this other character who happens to look exactly like this other character.
Yeah, and then they even try to explain that away in Aliens Colonial Marines where, oh yeah, that guy, he was a synthetic too. And you're like, what? And I think they even talk about it in the producer's cut or the director's cut where they kill him and he bleeds when he's with the dog catcher team.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the fuck, guys? And that's the thing, too. Like, if you retread the familiar so often, it's not special anymore.
Yeah, and it gets to the point where it kind of feels like those weird fan fictions.
Yeah, and
it's at a certain point, you're like, you remember, it's like, I remember being 12 and having daydreams about, what the next RoboCop movie would be like. And they were god-awful and terrible, but I enjoyed them. And the thing is, I'd never want them to see the light of day.
Yeah.
And then some of the stuff that's coming out now, I'm like, people are putting their names on this?
Yeah, like, it's weird. Like, and I think a lot of it really got the oomph. And again, I don't hate this guy. I want that to be crystal clear because I do enjoy some of his movies. It's the Zack Snyder syndrome. Where like, oh, I'm just going to do something cool because it's cool. And there's a guy on YouTube I really respect his insights. His name's Michael French, and he runs the channel Retro Blasting. And he made a video that's come out recently, and it's called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's one of his latest videos. But he talks about emotion is all that matters. Nostalgia is all that matters. And he did this huge 5-hour deep dive on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. By the way, fuck that movie. fucking hate them.
I still haven't recovered from the Crystal Skull.
Let's just say this one, you're going to be like, really? Fuck, why? But it's like you're being told, it's like someone's holding up a flashcard and telling you how to feel.
Yeah.
Like you don't get the emotional pay. Like you are on an emotional roller coaster, but you're not going on a journey. And with movies like Alien and Aliens, you see Ripley's journey. It's from a tough-ass warrant officer to a person who's been PTSD who tries to save... Like, she's getting over... Like, she's being very motherly to Newt, not because she has to, but because she wants to. And she's not because she's mourning her daughter, Amanda, or anything. Yeah. It's the right thing to do. And when she loses Newt in number 3... I think we're robbed of an emotional moment, but the point I'm trying to get across is when you do these fan fiction movies with, here's a cool cameo, it's not earned. So when the Alien series comes out, presumably I think next year, I worry. And even with Alien Romulus, what stupid bullshit are we going to get? Because I can't remember whether it was Alien versus Predator or Alien versus Predator Requiem, where it shows up in the Pred Alien and somebody goes to the Yutani Corporation and puts down the stupid shoulder cannon on the table and
hands it to Miss Yutani.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, fuck off. Like, don't do that. And see, that's the thing. I love Freddy versus Jason and I will defend this position. I will go to my grave defending this. That is, I think, one example of fan fiction in a movie that worked. I think you can make an argument for Godzilla versus Kong because, again, it worked. It works. It made money. People enjoy it. The continuity and the Apple TV series, it all seems to work together. But when you do certain properties and you fan fiction it, it gets really fucking dumb. Like, for example, Requiem. The first AVP is watchable, but I wouldn't call it good.
It's like that era of blockbuster where I think like after Jurassic Park, stuff really started to change.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much like movies. You could watch a movie and it, like you say, it takes you on a journey. And maybe it's not going to be holding your hand the entire time through it. And that can be an enjoyable journey. And then there's movies that are basically shaking their keys at you the entire time to keep you entertained. And you're there clapping because it's entertaining. But,
it's funny when you mentioned Jurassic Park, you just literally triggered this epiphany in me. And you think about it, the first Jurassic Park, groundbreaking. Yeah. We'll never see that type of wonder in a movie, I think, for a very long time.
Yeah, it was lightning in a bottle. Jurassic
Park 2, not necessary, but okay.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park 3 forward, it's keys in front of your face. There was no reason to bring back Alan Grant, Sam Neill, just because people wanted more of him and not Jeff Goldblum, which Jeff Goldblum, fine actor, funny character actor, but he's not a leading man action. Is Sam Neill? No, but people like Dr. Grant. Yeah. And then when you get into the Jurassic World movies with Chris Pratt, it's just, it's nostalgia goggles. And now he has a raptor sidekick because we have to sell toys. Yeah. And with the Aliens franchise, there are certain parts of this world that don't need filled out. Like the establishing of Weyland Yutani, as we talked about corporate malfeasance, especially in 2024. Yeah. Is there an interesting story there? Maybe. But the problem is your title. You're calling it Alien. We have established in universe, unless they throw us a curveball, which they're going to, that they go to LV-426, they find the derelict alien ship, and unless they tie it into the Prometheus timeline, and like, oh hey, here is random engineer creature, and here's a protomorph, and we know it's on LV-426. It cheapens the effect of the entire franchise. Yeah, I feel, and Alien, masterpiece. Aliens, masterpiece. Alien 3, declining returns. Alien 4, misunderstood but fine. And after that, you're right. It's like the jangling keys. Here's your fan service.
Yeah.
And not Covenant. Prometheus was an interesting idea. Did it need to be a movie? I don't know. And the thing is, I like Michael Fassbender. I love the idea of David. And I think if you could have told a side story and not involve the aliens and maybe put them in right at the very end, maybe it would have been okay.
Yeah, I think like that would have been the way to do it, is to like I think the way you hear Ridley Scott talk about it is he wanted to tell the engineer's story. It's like he was more interested in the story of the other stuff. And I think if he had actually made that movie and made it more about like the search through the cosmos for where we came from, and how synthetics played into that, maybe took the effort to actually flesh out the connection between the Blade Runner universe and this universe. But, no, instead we got slightly the more I think about it, the less I think I like the movie. But then I think if I can sit down and watch it, and I can kind of appreciate the craft that went into it.
Yeah, like, because there is some genuinely cool stuff there. It's just when you get into Alien Covenant, I think you get into overcorrection territory.
Yeah, it was like Prometheus. They had the same attention to detail. Everything looked plausible and lived in. And then in Covenant, they kind of went and said, okay, instead of doing all that lived in future stuff, we're just basically going to say,
here's the Marvel future.
It's all modern stuff that we have, but just with like extra bits on it. Like you hear a lot of people complaining that like Covenant, the thing that took them out is the fact that they're using modern weapons in it. That you see somebody with like an M4 or a Steyr IUG, or I think one of them has a Tavor, even an Israeli rifle, and like it wouldn't have been too hard to put just like a plastic casing on it like they did with a pulse rifle to make it look a little futury, but instead it's like, no, here's this, and oh, by the way, they're running around the planet in Covenant with GoPros attached over their backs, so they can record everything.
And it's funny because like the difference between Alien and Aliens is 57 years, and Prometheus to Alien, the difference isn't that much. Like less than 40 years. So weapons technology, it has tons of time to catch up, but even I'm going to hate myself for making this comparison, and I'm going to die on my own vomit when I say it. But in Halo first season, I know, grown, they're using Chinese AKs to defend a colony. So is it unreasonable to assume a colony ship would have older weapons? I say it's plausible, but you're right. They would have an early precursor of the pulse rifle because they would want, I'm not saying they're going to hand them the most like prototype weapons out of whatever, but they're going to have reasonable stuff.
Yeah. The only thing that like when I saw it and I thought about the universe a little bit more, like we can assume that in a lot of these places where they are going to be in the ass end of the universe, they're going to be using like a rapid prototyping or 3D printing. So basically, you're going to have an STL file for whatever, a shotgun or a pistol or something like that, and you're going to have to make it up on the printer. So maybe, you're out in the middle of nowhere. All you have is STL files for 21st century weapons.
Yeah, and that's something in Fireteam Elite that I love. They talk about fabricators that are located on the ships, these big colonial marine vessels that print these weapons, and you have to buy them from either the UPP, which is the Union of Progressive People, and Hyperdyne, or Weyland Yutani sends you the STL files and you can print whatever you want. And they actually, in Aliens Dark Descent, when your ship crashes on that planet, the ship will never be space-worthy, but it's still usable as a forward operating base. So it's got fabricators and a facility to rebuild whatever gear you need. But yeah, like there's something about that I've always kind of like, there's ideas here, but I don't know if they're fully thought out. This scene in particular has always, again, stuck with me as one of the great action scenes of all time. And what I mean by that is it's that heroic last stand. Hudson dying broke my heart because obviously he's that favorite. He's the character you want to see live.
Yeah.
And I guess because he got quite the arc in this movie, from being overconfident to being scared out of his mind to being a coward to being, I guess maybe he macho lost his mind in that, shooting up the hive, but he died fighting. But now we know he's going to do whatever. But I want to say it's maybe the Alan Dean Foster adaptation or something. Hicks fires a few shots into the hole to kill Hudson before he gets infected. Which, again, that's got to be brutal. And again, I wish there was some way to expand upon that, but without getting in the fan fiction kind of territory. I love that idea that he cares enough about his friend to not let him become that.
Yeah, and I know they address that a lot in the expanded universe, that, a lot of people are, take them out, like especially with the pathogen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of been explored, and I don't even think you'd really have time to put a person down. Oh, there's those shell casings coming out of the caseless rifle.
Yep, explosive tip caseless. Sure.
It happens so rapidly that it wouldn't do. And
Yeah.
I know there's actually one of those short stories, there's a bioweapon they use. They don't say that it's pathogen derived, but it certainly sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically, it just turns people all buggy, and they spit on each other to spread the infection.
Oh.
And they're watching, the people in the colony are watching this happening on the monitors and trying to figure out what's going on. And they go down to this tunnel. They're trying to see if anybody's coming up from the mines, and they can hear the sound of running water. But it turns out it's not running water.
It's the goo.
It's not even the goo. It's all the miners who are basically shuffling their feet and kind of moving towards the sound.
Oh.
And there's so many of them moving that it sounds like running water. And as soon as they make a noise and the miners see them, they basically wake up. They're with these weird spitting pathogen zombies.
Oh, that's cool. That's wild.
And a really wild, well-told story, and completely standalone.
Yeah, like there's so much interesting stuff that can happen in this universe that not everything needs a chest burster.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I think the beauty of how well the lore of this world was designed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember, like, there's one scene that I'm glad that's been cut, but as like everybody's talked about, because I think it would take away from the depth of the character and that character's arc.
Yeah.
Burke's, okay, I never noticed that before. Did you see the alien? Yeah. The twitch? I'm like, holy shit. That is, wow, that is impressive. But yeah, like there's a deleted scene. It's on YouTube. I think it's on this box set as well, where you see Burke in the hive. He's cocooned, and Ripley doesn't shoot him because she doesn't want to waste the bullets, and rightly so. But she gives him a grenade and just keeps moving. And Burke's like, I can feel it inside me. It's moving. It's moving.
Yeah.
Help me, Rip. And it's fucking heartbreaking. But at the same time, I'm glad we didn't get that scene because it takes away from his sudden death of him being a coward, knowing that he survived. I like the idea of the alien used its double jaws and just killed him or incapacitated him, and it's left up to our imagination.
And I'm fairly certain there's a short story in that bug hunt as well about him where he basically that scenario plays out, but he has this weird like pre-death hallucination that he gets out of the cocoon and manages to like lure a bunch of aliens away and help Ripley, but it turns out no, he just dies.
He just dies because he's fucking hallucinating from the poison, and that's
he has all kinds of weird hallucinations about his mother. It's a weirder story, probably less entertaining than the What If comic.
But yeah, like, it's crazy how much good stories lie in this universe, and you don't, like I said, you don't need the face huggers. You can really lay on to the human drama, because I think like this movie, other than being a great, aliens flick, it's a great tale of a person overcoming PTSD, or not even overcoming, learning to work with it and getting stuff done despite.
Yeah.
Like I think it's kind of funny. Like, people would call me woke because some of my heroes are women. No, most of my early heroes have always been girls. Like, I think of Sarah Connor and the person who was forced to become a soldier because she had to protect the future. And I love that idea of someone being resourceful enough to do the right thing because they had to. And with Ripley, I like the fact that she's not a soldier. She's not this fucking ultimate Billy badass. She's just a woman who decided to do what she could because she could. Mm-hmm. And that's the strength of the Alien kind of universe. And there's a couple of good stories in there. Like, I know there's a Bishop novel that goes into his thinking and how he's got like brothers who all look like him, but he actually has like a sense of humor, and he looks at humans a little bit kind of differently. Mm-hmm. And you think about that short story collection, Bug Hunt. Yeah. There's some great stories in there too. Like, it goes a little bit into Hicks's kind of background and stuff like that. There's another book that talks about Vasquez's kid. Yeah. Stuff like that. Like, again, having it set in the Aliens universe, it just gives you the window dressing, which is great.
There's a super depressing comic about her sister, I think, that, like, literally it's like everybody dies.
Yeah.
Spoilers. But I mean, that's pretty much the end of every Alien story, is either one person gets away or everybody dies.
Yeah, it's a super nihilistic view of the world, but I don't know, it's one of those series where, I don't know, I wouldn't call it super upsetting that everybody dies, but I don't know, there's just something valuable in that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And there's just something so, I don't know what it is about the Aliens universe that makes hopelessness seem interesting.
Yeah, well, it's, Star Trek is really fond of its no-win situations. So,
yeah,
it's kind of interesting to see other franchises and other directors take on, well, what do you do in the no-win situation?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just die, or you die but you make peace with something. And like, it's interesting because like the Alien was billed as a haunted house movie in space. Mm-hmm. This has been billed as an action movie, and they call it as, like, its tagline was, "This time it's war."
Yeah.
And you get a very interesting heroic story, but only two people really make it out of this unscathed, Ripley and Newt.
Yeah.
Hicks is fucked up, the only survivor of how many people were in the unit? Let's count them up.
At least a dozen.
Yeah, at least a dozen people. Bishop will never be the same again. And when Alien 3, when Ripley repairs him from the trash pile and says, "I'll never be top of the line again, I'd rather be nothing," that is fucking depressing.
Yeah, because he's literally saying, take me offline, kill me. I don't want to exist like this.
Yeah, like, and that, you could read into it in so many different ways. I mean, especially in Canada. I mean, maybe I'm reading a little too far into this, but there's something we have in Canada known as medical assistance in dying made because he's irrecoverably damaged to the point where he'll never be whatever. And if you know anything about the alien lore, when you're synthetic, your bodies just wear out. There is no way to repair you technically. Like, I don't even know how David repaired himself in Covenant, because it doesn't make any fucking sense, because he was a fucking head. But I know in the lore, at least as I understand it, part of the reason why synthetics have such a short lifespan, their muscles become rubbery. Like the elasticity just goes. So there's nothing they can do. Like,
yeah, which I can imagine that gets probably gets a little horrific.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing too. Like, there's so much body horror that isn't just roar, I'm a monster and I'm inside your guts now. But, you know, like, you look at what happened in Prometheus and Covenant with the pathogen, how it morphs you and destroys you. And it's not as horrifying as what the alien does with the face hugger in the chest burster. And, like, people have made say it's an analogy for rape and penetration and all that sort of thing. And again, horrifying. Not exactly how I'd want to die. And then you turn to this horrific shell of what you were to become this alien drone that shares a part of you but isn't you. Like, again, like, there's so many different layers of scary in this franchise that I can't think of many that have pulled it off this well. And I don't know how you create a franchise this memorable again, because it's more than just a monster. It's a setting. It's a philosophy. And you're right, with like Star Trek, it's, you know, hope springs eternal and infinite diversity, infinite combinations. And think of what you will about new Trek now. It's different than old Trek. I mean, there's certainly a discourse happening around Discovery right now. And I don't want to get into it. But long story short, there's new fans and old fans. Let's just say that. But with Alien, it's always stayed pretty consistent. The message really hasn't changed, with the exception of Prometheus and Covenant. And I don't know, you look at stuff like this, Cameron, when he wrote the script, he knew exactly the story he wanted to tell. The allegories were there, and it just worked. And I just realized you can tell where the Burke scene was cut if you know what you're looking for. Right here. Because right about here, Burke jumps out and grabs her. But there's kind of a cutaway shot. Again, folks, if you want to go see that scene, go look it up on YouTube. It's worth seeing once, but I can see why it was cut. Here's where she gets grabbed.
I think, like, in the novelization, there's also a scene where Bishop is going down that pipe and he actually encounters an alien. And, like, it just looks at him. Yeah, or it tries to get at him through a piece of perforated metal or something like that, but can't get at him, and just figures out, oh, well, he just kind of reacted to the movement. Yeah, it's not interested in me because I'm alive. It's not interested in me because I'm not biological. And there's even in Fireteam Elite, they say the xenomorphs won't attack the synths unless they attack first. And unless they see you as a threat. Yeah, and that's something I think so cool, that they kind of build that into the lore. Like, even with Star Trek and the Borg, there's even a thing like the Borg won't assimilate you or attack you unless they see you as valuable to the hive, or you're a visible threat. I mean, if you walk in there firing a phaser rifle, oh yeah, you're getting assimilated or you're getting phasered to death. With the alien, if you're a synthetic like Bishop or whatever, you're not a priority. We can't impregnate you, so you're not a valuable resource. Yeah, and it's excuse me, I think in some of the comics they explored ideas like pheromone blockers and things like that, which, funnily enough, I think there was Borg equivalents to those too, that you could wear something to kind of disguise yourself while you're in the hive.
There was a toy that the Kenner company put out in the early 90s, and the toy was called ATAX.
Oh, yeah, the dude in the alien suit.
Yeah, the dude in the alien suit, and his head, despite looking like, the big chap, he could fire his head as like a missile. And he wore these ridiculous high heels. Yeah. But yeah, he was an alien suit. And I remember in the comics too, there was this idea that the queen, if a hive had been established long enough, she could feed royal jelly, like secretions from her that would turn warriors into a more advanced drone called Praetorians. Mm-hmm. And then even in the latest book for the role-playing game, which is called Building Better Worlds, which is the Colony book, they talk about the king alien. They talk about the evolution, and that's something that Cameron did very smartly. He took Ridley's original idea and built a society for these things. There's like a hierarchy, and I remember him in Superior Firepower saying he built it upon a termite colony, because like you look here in this scene, the queen's attached to the ceiling via the ovipositor, and it's like a giant fucking termite. Mm-hmm. Which is, again, I think really, really, really cool. And if you look at the queen's design, you look at her foot, it looks like an exaggerated high heel. And this is one of those things that just stuck out in my mind as a kid, because I'd never seen a monster that looked this imposing. Like, I'd never seen anything truly like this before. Like
that scale.
Yeah, like an alien warrior or a drone, because there is a difference. A drone is what they encountered in Alien. Yeah, these are warriors. These are matured creatures that are bred for fighting, and they've been alive for a while. And whereas, the dog alien took the form of whatever, it's neat just to see how the aliens constantly evolve. I mean, I would argue Alien Resurrection doesn't do a lot with the life cycle because they're clones.
Yeah.
But Ridley, when he did Prometheus and Covenant, how the pathogen, the novomorph, the protomorph, and all that shit, I think that kind of takes away from it. Like, it's weird. Like we were discussing earlier in this, I guess, Alien Commentaries last discussion. Yeah. We were just kind of looking at like how you add to a mythos, but if you add too much. I think you said this to me a couple of weeks ago. It was like a phrase during one of our text message conversations. It was like, too many chefs in a kitchen ruin something.
Yeah, too many chefs spoil the brew.
Yeah, and I think with this, it's weird because you don't... I don't know. Like, I don't want to be so beholden, because like obviously I'm in love with this movie, but I have to look at what you add to a franchise. When does it become diluted? When do you lose what makes a series scary or magical? And I'm trying to identify when Aliens lost its proverbial way, in a sense. Because everybody could say it's easy to say Alien 3, but I don't think that's right either. Alien Resurrection is fine as... If Alien could have side stories like in Elseworlds, like Joker is to the Batman franchise,
yeah,
fine, sure. There was no need to clone Ripley. You could have taken the Ripley character out of that movie and it would have been fine. Alien 3 needed to conclude that storyline, but I think if the Alien series had ended here, it would have been okay if she just drifted off back to Earth with Newt. Not necessarily got the happy ever after, because it's still kind of ambiguous whether the Sulaco will make it back to Earth.
Yeah. And I mean, like the I can't remember if it came out as something different than Newt's Tale at first. Mm-hmm. They basically came out with a story that was supposed to be what happened to Hicks, Newt, and Ripley, and then they lost the rights to it for the comic.
Oh, and then they have to change the names and everything to
then
Billy.
It's like Billy and somebody else, and it's like it's not Hicks, but you read the story, and that's what's supposed to have happened. And I mean, it's like even that, like the Dark Horse era. And that era of novels, like when I go back and I'm re-listening to some of the audiobooks,
some of it's good, some of it's like, ugh.
Some of it is like super, super cringy because you can tell it was written by a middle-aged man to appeal to teenage boys.
Yeah.
And then you think, and you're like, yeah, when I was in my teens and reading that, I probably thought it was probably pretty neat. And now I'm hearing it again. I'm like, oh my God, it's like I consumed trash fiction, and I can put my nose up in the air at things like Twilight and the Wizard books, but the stuff that I read growing up was probably just as bad.
Oh yeah,
apart from the Alan Dean Foster stuff, that guy, he can do no wrong.
And yet Cameron, I think, hates him. Yeah, because I remember there was something I watched recently, because Cameron's like, well, I'm not going to let him write my adaptation of Avatar. Dude, fuck off. Like you're a great director when you want to be, but you get up your own ass about certain things. And stuff like expanding upon a universe is all well and good as long as you don't get in your own way. And when you're doing something like that, there's so much that can go wrong. And I think about that era of the Dark Horse era. And I specifically remember when the Alien versus Predator novels were coming out, and they made the human alien predator friend something Noguchi or whatever, aka Asian girl with sword who befriends a predator.
Yeah, and I think her predator name is Little Blade
or some shit like that. I'm thinking, all right, fine. Yeah. But it's so goofy and over the top, whereas Aliens say something. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Alien 3 says. Maybe I need to watch it again with a more critical eye. I don't know what Resurrection says. I guess no one can tell you who you are.
Yeah, I think there's like a found family message in there as well.
Yeah, I guess with her and Call.
Yeah, and there's a whole expanded universe story about what happens to them afterwards.
Yeah,
as well, that it feels very Joss Whedon verse, because I guess his fingerprints are on that property, and that kind of weird. There's some of that Dark Horse era cringe in there. But I think any film of that era sort of has that weird sort of, snorting nudge, nudge, wink, wink, look at this kind of thing.
And when I look at how this film could have ended, like this could have been really fucking dark.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it leaned, like, you think it could happen. Like, it is... The Queen's coming out of the elevator. She knows how to do it. Ripley's close your eyes. And I love how Newt's like, look, the dropship. Like, that's cool. I mean, honestly, this is great suspenseful storytelling. Like, there's just so much here. And again, there's something we've never talked about in this commentary. The score by James Horner.
Yeah,
this was done in like 6 weeks.
Like, apparently this final musical sting that has been reused so many times over and over and over and over again was like written at the 11th hour. He pulled it out of his butt, which, I mean, like, granted, he was in a time crunch. And one thing I've noticed is that his score for is it Search for Spock?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's a Search for Spock. A lot of the Klingon music, it basically sounds like the Marine theme in a different key. So, I mean, he might have reused some ideas, but he still came up with an amazing soundtrack.
Yeah, like, it's amazing how much this just, it works, and it's such a simple score. And that's something else. I think I like a lot of movies out of the 1980s because some of the scores are so iconic. Like, to me, James Horner for this movie, Basil Pomedoros for Conan, and for RoboCop. is just it. There are certain pieces that stick with you. Like for that, this scene, the RoboCop march, and I think the piece is called The Riddle of Steel.
I want to say Basil did Starship Troopers as well.
Yes, he did.
I'm fairly certain he's responsible for Klendathu Drop, which, I mean, that...
Oh, yeah, that's such an epic piece. Yeah. And then you look at, like, The Terminator, which I think was written over the course of, like, a weekend with Brad Fiedel. Again, all that amazing score.
Synthesizer work.
Like, my favorite... There's the opening theme to The Terminator, which is iconic, but there's a piece that I really love, and it's called Love Scene. And
the Terminator love theme.
Yeah, like that's amazing. And again, it's so simple and it works. Mm-hmm. And for Aliens, this is one of those things where the movie could have just ended. Mm-hmm. Like, get away from the Queen. Yeah, you fought her. Yeah, you threw fucking grenades and you flamed her. Yeah. And this could have been just the wrap up. Golly gee, I guess we're gonna go back to sleep now. Right.
This is how to do multiple endings right.
Yeah.
Unlike Lord of the Rings.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, not fucking Frodo and like the 30,000 endings. And see, I love it.
You can see the wire in the shot.
Oh. And people thought this was going to be a face hugger, but it's such a fake out.
And poor Lance Henriksen having to chug down
all that rotten
yogurt. Such a great effect.
Oh, yeah. And just the fact that he's still alive, and because you know how tough synthetics are. And again, it makes the Ian Holmes character from the first Alien look like you know how tough these guys are. Yeah. And the Queen just ripped him to shreds without a second thought. Yeah. One thing I haven't talked about in this is the merchandise with the Alien franchise. There's been some really good stuff. There is an Alien Queen figure that I think runs at least $1,000 now on the secondary market minimum. The amount of detail that is on it, there are figures of all the Marines.
Oh yeah, some of the stuff that has come out is like absolutely incredible because like I think the attention to detail within the film lends itself to, you know, all these little bits of merchandising that they can go and look at the photographs of the original props and basically make a one-to-one replica.
There's a guy that I know, as of this recording, we're probably going to be doing a podcast with him talking about a completely different thing in a couple of weeks, but he built his own Alien kit. Cosplayers can do some really fantastic work. I know Adam Savage from Mythbusters built a motion tracker.
Oh yeah, he's built some amazing things, and I have massive respect for makers and the people that can do this stuff. And like I'm learning the hard way that like yes, I have skills and I can make stuff, but two things. One, I'm not very good at it. And two, I'm old and my hands are really busted. So it's like when I was young, I could do all kinds of sewing, and I even like less than a decade ago, I learned how to do something called fork weaving. And you just use this little wooden tool, and you're taking a cord and you're making a stronger bit of cord and square knotting it. And I'd do it, and my hands wouldn't hurt. And now it's like 3 turns of the thing, and all of a sudden, every single knuckle joint is screaming at me. So I'm like, oh. So I'm finding ways to like buy off the shelf stuff that looks really close, and with the addition of a few patches, it's like if you squint at it, yeah, kind of my great value brand cosplay.
That's something else. Like, there's something about this scene. The fact that she's fighting this biological example of perfection, let's say, to borrow a phrase, with what is essentially a forklift is, again, it's something that, you know, like the heroes get the awesome BFG or the Iron Man suit or the proton pack. This is a piece of industrial equipment. Yeah. And it's one thing I don't like about the Alien franchise, and I hate this. I hate this so much, that they've weaponized the power loader. In every game, they've turned it into a tool that has a gun on it, or is not what this is. I like how here it is a tool.
I think the only game that really got close to portraying it properly was the arcade game.
Yeah. Like, it's just it's a piece of kit that moves, and that's fine. That's all it needs to be. Is just it's a forklift. That's all it is. And Ripley uses it in a very unconventional manner. And again, I like that because it shows quick, clever thinking. She's not a soldier. She doesn't have the APC. She doesn't have the weapons of the dropship. Mm-hmm. Also, one thing I love in this scene, and I don't know if it's intentional, but the Queen's tail, her stinger's been broken off.
Yeah. Like, I'm hoping that is...
Intentional?
Intentional. It's like, oh, she was damaged and not, they broke the model or whatever from dropping it so many times, and the only good shot that they had was one without the tail, which, I mean, hey, maybe that's what happened, and,
I also love how the alien gets blown out of the airlock in 2 movies, but here this is even different than the first one. Like, and that's the thing about almost every Alien movie ends with the airlock sequence, with the exception of 3.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it, but even that Queen may not even be dead unless it hits the atmosphere, because they can survive in vacuum.
Yeah. Which I think... there was a weird... I don't know if it was like an actual storyline that they explored, but in the end of the first Alien versus Predator, the Queen is somewhere, under the Arctic Circle in the ice. Mm-hmm. And there's a future story where climate change has melted the ice caps. And all of a sudden, the Queen resurfaces.
Okay.
And I mean, it's like, that's one way to explain a hive on Earth, but you're stretching there.
But it's like, yeah, I mean, that's a little much.
I mean, like, she's really just going to... Eventually, she's going to sink to the bottom.
I remember there in Aliens Colonial Marines, which was quote unquote, they touted this as canon. And there are parts of it I like and parts of it I don't. But supposedly after this, because the Sulaco has been floating around Archeron for like 17 weeks or some bullshit, they say, that it's completely infested. Where did these aliens come from? And they try to explain it away, and it's goofy as bullshit that it just doesn't work. And like I said, with this type of stuff, it's hard to do expanded universe right when you've nailed certain things so perfectly.
Yeah.
And even here, like I said, this could have been a scene where it didn't need to be this could have been the end of the Aliens franchise. And I would have been sad, but I would have been okay, because then you could have got books, which again, as we've discussed, diminishing returns.
Yeah, some of them are great. Others, eat up time.
Yeah, and others simply dead trees. Yeah. But it's so strange because, like I said, this is such a good franchise, but I guess I worry about the future. I want Romulus to be good.
Yeah.
And there's something to me about this scene. I always wondered, I know that's Carrie Hine, but it looks like she was aged up. Like I always get the impression that she's older here. And I don't know why I've always thought that. Like, it's just something like maybe they're in hyperspace so long and she's aging. I don't know. That's something I've always had in my mind.
Could have been like a pickup shot that they forgot to get. But
yeah, maybe.
In a lot of the special features, they mentioned that, like, basically her and Sigourney Weaver were the orphans at the end because they were the only ones filming.
Yeah, but like they had just themselves and they just like kind of hung out. To talk about some of the people from this movie, the guy who played Wazowski, I think his name is Trevor Steadman. He's actually since passed away. Al Matthews has passed away. James Horner has passed away. I know the original DP on this, I think his name was Dick Bush, has also passed away. Stan Winston has passed away. There's a lot of people in this movie that are just unfortunately no longer with us. But we still have powerhouses like Gale Ann Hurd, who's still producing in Hollywood to this very day. Obviously had a very successful run on The Walking Dead. James Cameron is still pumping out those Avatar movies for whatever good that does.
Yeah, I still haven't seen the second one.
See, it's weird. I like it, but it feels about 45 minutes too long. And because most of it is set up where you need to have seen the first movie. And it's funny, we can talk about Jurassic Park here again. Via the miracle of cloning, people are back. It's fucking stupid. But it's got its moments, I'll say.
Yeah.
Better video games than movies, if you can believe that. And again, with Aliens, you can almost make the exact same argument.
Yeah.
But
well, I think that's why Fireteam Elite ends up being so much fun, because it's at its base, it's a power fantasy where you're given the sandbox to play in and go fight bugs with all the guns from the franchise, and like all the level models or everything look like they're straight out of the film. So it brings you right in there, and you can basically make up your own story as you go along.
yeah, like it's kind of astounding. And think about this. Look how short these credits are. Think about compare this to a Marvel movie that takes like fucking 15 minutes to end. We've been rapping for less than 5 minutes, and this is over. Yeah. Like, that's astounding. So anyway, guys, we are going to wrap things up here at This Week in Geek. Like I said, big thanks to Free League Publishing, who constantly provides me with Aliens material to talk about here on the show. I did purchase this disc on my own. If you want to buy your own copy of this, you can check your local big box retailers. This movie is a little hard to find right now because I hear there were supply issues. I did see that on the Aliens Reddit, which I think is the Reddit's LV426, I think is what it's called. Liam just farted. Beautiful. A little bit of an extra for you.
Pardon me.
But yeah, like there's so many good Alien things to talk about. Like, again, if you want to read the Marvel comics that are being done right now, it is the Burke story. They're under Aliens What If, but there are other several Aliens comics going on right now. I do believe I know there was a Predator versus Wolverine story within the last couple of years. Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Aliens Dark Descent is a fantastic game. I think Aliens Fireteam Elite was recently part of PlayStation Plus. I just bought it because I wanted the Pathogen DLC. So I'm going to futz around with that. Again, if you look in the episode post, there is a link to Liam's Extra Life. Please consider donating. I'm going to be doing a Pokemon thing later on in the future with this during the summer. Like I said, first week of July, I think it is.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
I think so too. And if you're interested in more tabletop stuff for Alien, like I said, you can visit the Free League Publishing website, and I will probably be offering the Alien RPG as one of the games that I offer if you want to hire me for anything tabletop related, if you want to experience your own adventure in the verse, so to speak. So for This Week in Geek, we have been
Liam Larson.
I have been Mike the Birdman, saying in space, no one can hear you scream.